It's all yours, George.
Now you're on, Mr. Chairman.
I take it you opened the meeting.
No, not yet. Bob knew you was coming.
Are you ready to go, Bob?
We are ready.
I should have waited.
From you're nice to him, Bob, you're not nice to me.
So with that, I will call the meeting to order. And I'd ask if anyone's recording, that they make it known. Thank you. Minutes of November 27th. Have you had a chance to review those? Go ahead. Everyone's okay with the minutes? I'll take a
Yeah.
motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of November 27th as written.
Second.
Motion's made. Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Aye.
Very good. We have Bayside Agricultural, 77 Charlotte Furnace Road for a minor modification.
Mr. Chairman, you have correspondence in your packet from Bayside Agricultural for a change in the outside lighting.
Okay. We touched on this last meeting, the correspondence, that they would like to add, I believe it's 3 lights along the driveway. Because they have, certain times a year, they have employees leaving late at night, and it's kind of a dark section of road.
But I haven't received other backup.
In the form of,
Form of details of the plan,
other than this,
other than the letter.
you didn't get this?
Yeah, that came with it.
Mhm.
So if you find that that's sufficient, then you can proceed to determine whether or not it's a minor modification. And so approved.
I think it's minor. I told him to put the lights there in the first place.
I believe I saw wiring in a different spot, but that might have been for the sign.
The sign was way up front, remember?
Yeah. Any questions?
I would agree that it's a minor modification.
Could I get a motion to that effect?
Make a motion to approve a minor modification for the installation of 3 additional lights.
As shown on that plan.
Yes, shown on the plan.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a revision date there.
Drawing 409.
12/15. Oh,
There's an older plan with the hand mark changes.
mhm.
So you can condition this on a plan showing the actual locations of the lights as the as-built plan or prior to issuance of a permit, building permit?
I think they already have a building permit, so it'd have to be added to the plan. They're already under construction, so.
Yeah.
So there was a motion and a second to approve as conditioned, added to the as-built. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That'll do it. Next, we have a public hearing for Heidi Dobbins Morse on Spring Avenue, special permit site plan review. We got the green cards back there?
Yeah, got green cards back. Here's the notice.
Planning Board will hold a public hearing on December 11, 2017 at 7 PM in room 320 of the Wareham Multi-Service Center, 48 Marion Road, to consider a special permit and site plan review from the requirements of Article 6, Section 613, and Article 3, Table 321 of the Wareham zoning bylaws to Heidi Dobbins Morse, care of Heb Builders, 498 Newtown Road, Littleton, Mass., seeking to construct 5 duplex residential structure on the property shown on Assessors Map 115, Lot C-1B, located at Spring Avenue, 2718 Cranberry Highway, Wareham, Mass., Assessors Map 115, Lot C1, in the MR30 zoning district.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Brian Hebb. I'm the owner of Hebb Builders. This is Ed Glass, our civil engineer, and my brother Mark. We came before you guys. We've never done business in the town of Wareham before. We've been building properties for 30 years, developing properties, building houses, so we figured the best thing to do is to come in and see what for this type of project before we start getting really deep into it from an engineering point of view, etc. We're proposing 5 duplexes on this property with site improvements, road improvements, town water, gas, improvements on the roadway and infrastructures going to and from the property. We just started a similar project over in Sagamore Beach, 48-unit condo project. Ocean Pines condos. We have a website on that, oceanpineSagamoreBeach.com. So basically what we've done over there is we've taken 3 units in a building and we've scaled it down to 2 units in a building over here. So we're using very similar designs as over there, just there's only gonna be 2 units in these buildings. So basically we're trying to get like a real temperature and a mood for what you guys would like, what you don't like, what we can do, what we can't do. I don't like to come into a town that I've never done business before and get blindsided, so we try and make it friendly and come in and do it the way the town wants it. My brother Mark's had conversations with people on the board, the planning board, fire chief. Who else, Mark?
Mr. Buckland, the town planner, met preliminary meetings with the building commissioner and the Lieutenant Smith on the fire department. I've met a few times. I spoke to him again today. He said they don't really get involved until site review. We're not really at that point yet. We're here to try to see what you people would be receptive to.
Just a larger size version of the plan right there.
What is the website you mentioned for your other development?
OceanPineSagamoreBeach.com. We got the first 6 units up right now, 3 occupied, and we're just starting the next buildings over there.
So,
This is one of those unusual circumstances where the planning board is the special permit granting authority rather than the zoning board of appeals as a multifamily project.
no, it requires, what, 45,000 square feet for the second unit? And then 10,000 additional for each subsequent unit? Is that how, did we find if that was accurate?
The minimum lot area is, for one family is 30,000 square feet. For two family is 45,000 square feet, another 15,000. For other residential use is 30,000.
Well, I think that would mean, I'm trying to think why other residential use would be different than the number of units.
So how did you calculate the density? How did you figure?
Basically what we did is we looked at it as multifamily on the same lot, which gave us our setbacks, our requirements, and also the 30,000 square feet. We have 70,000 square feet. So we're just about a little over an acre and a half. We looked at it, and that's a lot of the reason why we're here tonight is to clarify some of those points. We feel that we can get these 5 units on this building, on this lot, with a good traffic flow, lots of separation. We meet all the sideline setbacks, we meet the coverage. But the density is not straightforward. That's why we met with the building commissioner, to make sure we were proceeding along the right lines.
Three-unit combination.
What's on that lot now?
Nothing, it's just treed. It's a pretty flat lot.
What's the landmark there?
No, next street up. Across from Standard Repair.
Spring Street is not constructed, right? It's just a stub there right now.
Right. In our proposal, we're proposing to tie into that based
You know
on,
what this is, George?
To where?
There's a house right up front here. We just subdivided this.
I think this is the piece we just
This is the
subdivided.
back piece, right?
Yeah.
There's a house right up here, Donald.
Mhm.
Donald Rogers lives.
It goes up to Spruce Street. Spring goes up to Spruce right now. Look on the map up there, it goes right up to Spruce.
It's built just, the existing road is built just past Spruce Street right now. We're proposing to extend it all the way to the end of our property and tie it into Spring Street.
That was in front of us, John, a few weeks ago.
Oh, excuse me, Summer Street.
Yeah, we cut this section
There's a
off
house
of
in
the
the
front.
front on 28, and we cut this back portion off. So you're gonna construct the rest of Spring Street all the way out to Summer in the back, right?
Correct, that's what we're proposing right now.
There's a lot. Yeah, so there is a house out front here. Is that a paved road or is that a dirt road, Spring Avenue?
It's paved up until just past Spruce.
Spruce, yeah. Oops, sorry, I hit you. A lot there.
At the same time, we would bring the, like the town water utilities all the way up and through so other people would have access.
Summer
The
Street.
gas, we've talked to the gas company. We could bring natural gas up that road too for an added cost that we're willing to spend. So anybody on that street would have access to natural gas at that point too.
We did on Brown Street, was it 8 houses on an acre? Was that 40B? Battle and a half? I think I was here for that. That was a zoning battle.
That was a, it was a cluster, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a mess.
In what ways than one?
Hate to say I told you so, but
The only point of access in there would be Spring Street, Spring Ave?
No.
No, actually, if we construct it the way we're thinking, you could go in Spring Street, you could come in from Spruce,
In summer.
Spring Avenue, or Summer. Spruce right now is built to Spring Ave. That's a through road all the way. So what would happen is by tying into Summer Street, we wouldn't be creating a dead end right there. With our flow in our site and the access in and access out, we don't really need to go all the way to Summer Street. But we were actually thinking that the police and fire would prefer that. We don't see it as a thoroughfare, because it doesn't really go anywhere. I don't think any of the traffic we're gonna generate is gonna use Summer or Spruce. And it didn't look like there'd be too much traffic actually coming back through those lots either. I think people will follow the patterns that they're already following.
And the intent is condominium or?
Yes.
Where was that verbiage before?
on which one, look again?
Hmm.
Doesn't that drop off in the back, gets a little wet in that upper right-hand corner?
It starts to
Within the
slope
area.
off. That was a question that came up during one of our initial meetings. We met with conservation.
Is that where it was?
And I've gone out there, I'm not a wetland biologist, but I've been doing this for 30 years. And our assessment is that if you really stretch the wetland, we're still over 120 feet to the property line. We have staked out what we'd call the rear property line.
Explanation
and
of the
left property
45,000
line
square
north
feet.
and
Where's that?
Parallel to,
The reason I asked that, because I remember probably about 10 years ago, on the backside of Summer Street, I want to say Lot 10, used to be the playground. and that was exchanged for some land. Wasn't there a swamp in there?
Yep.
And we questioned it. They were exchanging a buildable lot, and they put the playground in the swamp so the kids could play with the turtles and stuff. That seems to be the back corner of your lot.
No, it's not right now. It's deceiving out there, but if you do go out, like I say, it has been staked out. And there's a trail that runs pretty much along our entire property line there. And that's definitely high and dry. And like I say, even if I tried to extend what I would consider the reach of the wetlands, we're still well over 120 feet from those.
I think that's putting 10 pounds of stuff in a 2-pound bag. See what I'm talking about?
Have you approached the butters on this proposal?
This used to be the playground.
The butters were all notified.
All wet.
Some of us are here would like to speak.
Oh, yeah, no, we'll get there. I guess the question I was gonna ask is the same question that my partner just asked. Besides notifying them with a green card that there was a hearing tonight, did you talk to any of them yet?
No.
Okay.
We're trying to get more direction from the board. I'd be more than happy to talk to any of the abutters. We do it frequently. I've been doing this for 30 years. So we're just trying to get a direction first before we get into it pretty deep.
Charlie, yes,
A couple of questions, if I may, George.
sure.
Have you done any soils exploration out there?
No.
No. I would suggest that you do. Across the street and in other sections of that Sunny Acres development, groundwater can be significant. So if you're thinking about buildings that have full cellars, I wouldn't design that without actually going in there and exploring that first to make sure that the high groundwater that you find is down far enough to where you can get that cellar in. Across the street, when you go into the development across the street, during the springtime, you can see water flowing out of the woods onto the street. It's Meadowlark Drive, I believe, that goes in there.
Which street is that?
That's
Meadowlark.
across 28 from where you are.
On the other side?
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, I'm just suggesting you do your explanation sufficient so that you're comfortable with where that high groundwater will be in that area. I don't think the soils themselves will be an issue. I did a number of on-site sewage disposal upgrades in that general area. Also did a subdivision out back a number of years ago. I'm familiar with the area. And some of the area that at one time was thought to be high and dry was actually determined, I believe, by the Corps of Engineers, if memory serves me correct, might have been the EPA, that it was actually wetlands. So just be sure, before you get too far, that you get a determination from the Conservation Commission as to where that line actually stops.
Yep.
So that you know you've got your setback that you have. So that would be one concern that I would have if it were my project. The second thing is that if you've got 10 units there, how many bedrooms in each unit?
We've been designing the ones over in Sagamore Beach with just 2 bedrooms in each
Two
unit.
bedrooms?
Yeah.
So you're looking at a total of 20 bedrooms here.
Mhm.
That's fairly substantial for on-site storage. There is no sewer in this particular area. So you'd want to be checking on that, just see whether you've got room enough for, both for the main infiltration area as well as the secondary area. And the last thing I would suggest to you, just looking at the plan, is I don't see any areas there that might accommodate some overflow parking. If people come in there and want to visit, you've got 2 parking spaces in front of each building that I see, but there's no place for anybody else to park unless they're gonna park in that little circle drive. So you might give some thought to putting in 3 or 4 just overflow parking spaces in case somebody gets a visitor, they've got a place to park and not obstruct that road. What's the width on the pavement, by the way?
It's shown as 24 feet.
24?
24, and I agree with you that there are some areas to add some overflow parking. I have analyzed, based on good soils, whether I could get a trench system in, and that is shown, actually, it's the hatched area.
Okay.
So if we did end up with some 2-minute per, 5-minute less, which I'm assuming based on
I think you will.
stuff.
I think you
We
will.
did not check water table, that's, I
Okay,
appreciate
that's critical. For some reason, that whole area, in behind Perry's Ice Cream and directly across the street into the condo project that was there, groundwater was a problem.
Okay,
So
that's good to know.
just check it out quick, or early. Check, not quick, but early.
Thank you.
Can't find that verbiage that's explained the extra square footage after 3.
For the dimensional standards under Article 6. Tell me about that.
George, I have a vague recollection of, I think, what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it got changed from that particular provision to what you see now. But I was looking in the back of the zoning bylaw book, and there were some changes that took place back in the 90s. Whether or not that made the change that you're looking for, I'm not sure.
Well, we just had one on Swift Reach Road where an 2 dwelling units in MR 30 require 45,000, and then it was either 10 or 15,000 for each additional.
I remember that being in the bylaw, but
And it was,
No place do I see
in
it.
one book we had here, and it was not in another one, so I don't know what the history of that extra.
I don't know either.
That's overlay. I think Ken took the page out because I read it last time. So this particular
across from your projected property, project, are they single-family homes?
Yes. There's one, I think it's an abandoned home.
But they're
The one that's-
single-family structures?
The one that's closest to the property, I believe, is abandoned. More of
So
Spruce
this
Street
is-
and
This
Spring
is just a
Ave.
special permit, right? No site plan at this point.
That's right. Special permit. It probably has 9 spaces though, which would need site plan review. Special permit too.
Well, I think that's commercial, but, I mean, it was listed in the, listed on the agenda as special permit / site plan, but this is just a hearing for site plan. I mean, special permit.
Yeah, they
to
want,
grant the use.
they wanted to get the use decided on.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question to the board is, does the density seem appropriate for the neighborhood, for the property?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what they want to hear.
Is Summer Street another name for, am I reading this correctly? I see Spring Street, or Spruce Street. And then,
Summer Street is another street in the neighborhood.
Summer Street's right here.
right, but it says Falk Street here.
Have a plan. You got this, Manny?
No.
It's right here. This is,
Okay, okay.
It's not shown here. This is street right here, was never shown. Fall Street. This is Grove.
This is the property. I suspect the area you were talking about is over here, or you were concerned with wetlands.
No, I was just not sure. I was confused by that.
This corner right here is all Susan. This lot right here was deemed as the recreational lot for the subdivision.
It would seem appropriate, how I look at it. It would seem appropriate, more appropriate.
Not put on one lot, yeah.
So, Mark, so this lot is here?
This lot is,
I just don't know what
triangle right now.
This house is.
Okay, okay, okay.
other residential would mean,
House is straight up,
Yeah,
just
okay.
a
because these are 5 two-family dwellings.
We cut it off and created a lot of that. And the question was asked if they're gonna continue that street up there.
Yeah, if you look at 2-family. Spring just ends,
Right, it just goes, next is the driveway
this
basically,
is
that's
the
all.
abandoned house.
That's considered residential,
Mhm.
correct, under your zoning that we have a copy of?
Mhm.
We're just trying to get a feel for what's allowed under the special permit for this particular type of property, what you guys would allow, so we can take some of these suggestions and get a determination on the wetlands and do things like perk test and water tables and add additional parking.
Retail business right there.
It's just over 70,000 square feet, a lot.
It's in a residential area. And it's also in the.
Not an interpretation now.
Yeah, and I suppose the way you could interpret it to say that it's 30,000 for a single family, 45,000 for a two-family, and then 30,000 for every additional unit, other residential use. Which would mean that for that size property, there could be 3 units. That's one interpretation you could make.
What's the better one?
Better one is to say that 30,000 square feet is the minimum lot size for alternative residential, which would be 3, 4, and 5 family.
4, 5, 2-family dwellings? No?
Well, two-family is defined for the minimum lot area. So this would have to be other residential use.
So under the multi-family residential use, is that what that is?
The MR30 district.
Right.
You're trying to use existing plans for efficiency reasons right now?
No, they're not exactly the same plans. They're just slightly smaller, and they're gonna be two-family, 2 units in a building.
Does this only work with 5 structures on it, or is it worth your energy to go with 4 structures?
I think, look at, we want to be friendly partners with the town.
Right.
If you guys said to me today, Brian, you can't do 5, but we would probably let you do 4, of course. But if we go less than that, it's really not worth it.
I don't know.
Okay.
Really. It's not worth it. But I mean, I can see a scenario where we would eliminate that front building. So now you got the 4 buildings across the back in a semicircle, and we could add more parking there and stuff like that. Yeah, I can see that. 4 would work financially, because we're gonna bring down, we're spending a lot of money with the town water, the paving, the gas. Although the gas has come back and said they made a mathematical mistake miraculously, and they brought their price down all of a sudden.
Usually it goes the other way.
When we told them we were going some other direction. But yeah, 4 buildings would work. Like I said, we'd probably eliminate, just leave these up, these like this, eliminate this one, and we can put more parking there. More green space.
It refers to this?
You purchased this piece of property with the intent of developing it?
Oh, yeah.
So this was your plan all through?
Yeah.
It's one of those things we corrected, actually.
The 5 units really seems to be crowding it, and we understand the economics that drive this, but you have the picture of 3. 5 is crowding it.
Well, we had a conversation a minute ago that if we went down to 4, where we would eliminate this building right here, the one out front, you'd add more spaces, parking and more green space, and then have these 4.
Give me 1 second.
Sure, no, take your time, I just.
4
I'm missing the pictures.
just about the minimum economically to do the project, because we're bringing down a lot of utilities and road work and town water and that thing and such.
What are you bringing down for utilities? What, you need a gas?
Gas, town water, electric, paving of the road.
Well, if you put one house, you're still gonna have to bring down electric and water.
Not me.
There's already town water there, but we'd be increasing the size of the main, and then we've had preliminary talks with the water department, and I believe it's the lot on the corner of Spring Ave and Spruce Street, the second house in on the left.
Yeah.
They'd re-tap the water main in their service according to the water department. So it'd be improvements to
This is the density.
the water infrastructure, fire hydrants, that type of thing. Gas, and then the tie-in to Summer Street, if that's still viable based on the number of units.
What was the square footage in Sagamore Beach?
For the units themselves,
Yeah.
like I said, these are slightly smaller units, but see, we have 3 units in a building over there. The 2 end units are 1,700 square feet because of the first floor masters and there's a 1-car garage on the end units. But the middle unit was 1,430 square feet. But these would all be end units with 1-car garages.
So these are 3, so is it, could you go just with 3 structures, 3-unit structures? So where you have 1 and 2 would be a 3-unit structure, 3, 4, 5, 6 would be a 3-unit structure, 7, 8 would be a 3-unit structure. Leave the center absent, so you'd end up with 9 units? So basically eliminate the one you're talking about.
Right.
Combine the 2 that are together there into a 3-person unit, so you end up with 9 units, but only 3 structures?
So basically do what we did over in Sagamore Beach with 3-unit structures. Make it, and do 3 of them.
Yeah, because I think that essentially the footprint of the structures would be less than what those 5 are showing right there. and it would open up the center.
I mean, obviously, we're open to anything. The only thing that I see with that is that we'd have to do a fire suppression system in each one of those buildings, but that's an added cost. But if we're getting 9 units, I think it would work. Anytime you go over 2-family, you have to put the fire suppression in.
I just want to show them the aesthetics of what this comes out to be. This is the aesthetics. That's a 3-unit. This is the density.
Is that consistent with the density in the neighboring properties here?
Well, this is Saginaw.
Yeah.
This,
You find anything, or were you looking up what this?
This is one of
the address on
that's
that?
single family.
2708.
Yeah, Carberry Highway. Well, this is to scale.
that's 3.
Yep.
Be a good idea.
Yep. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on it? If you'd use the microphone, please, and identify yourself.
My name is Dorothy Vicino. I live at 3 Fall Street, which that's part of that property. And I have a couple of issues. First, the first notice that was sent out says that we received a notice October 19th, which none of the abutters received. It was supposedly sent out certified. Not one of the abutters received it. The second notice, which was the hearing that several of us did attend, which was continued, we did receive. We were here, it was continued. I did go to the town planner and asked what happened, which at that time I was told it was withdrawn, and if it was gonna happen, it was going to be continued and have to start from scratch. Then 2 weeks ago, I received a notice to attend this meeting. The next notice I received had everything dated for November, which obviously was not true. So I'm receiving 2 different papers with different dates on it.
Originally, we were advised to proceed under the ZBA, based on speaking to Mr. Buckland and the building commissioner. And so we proceeded with the application for the ZBA. At the 11th hour, as I looked into it, I talked to the building commissioner again, and he said that it was planning board. I believe at that time Mr. Buckland was on vacation, so we decided to withdraw without prejudice and pursue the planning board special permit as opposed to the ZBA. That's where the confusion comes in.
But all the dates shouldn't change. I work in a town hall. I work in the assessing office. I understand about pulling a butters list. So you shouldn't have one notice stamp received by a town clerk with October and then the next notice being sent out, say in November. That's my first issue.
Again, one was in front of the ZBA, this is now in front of the planning board, so we just as part of our fee, we pay to have the abutters notified, so we don't do the actual notification.
My other issue, the property you're talking about, that comes near Fall Street and abuts my neighbors behind me that are on Summer Street, that back property is soaking wet in the corner. I've lived there for 29 years. I built my home, that back corner floods out onto Fall Street every spring, every winter. It is soaking wet every spring, every fall. So to sit there and say that it's not wetland and it does not, it is wet.
We'll file a determination with conservation, and they'll flag it.
And it is gonna create a traffic issue. It is gonna create problems in the neighborhood as far as residential areas. And my other issue is I did inquire at the Board of Health. They have a 3-bedroom permit for the septic system for these dwellings, not a 2-bedroom septic system.
We don't have any permits for these.
Well, I inquired into it, and I was told that they were gonna have 3-bedroom septic systems, so.
Wareham Board of Health regulations require 1 extra bedroom, so if you're building a 2-bedroom home, you'd put in a 3-bedroom system. I don't know if they waive that, or if they have any alterations from that, but that's their rule of thumb. So that's probably why they told you a 3-bedroom system.
Now, the plan says 30 bedrooms right on it, so that's what they're figuring for.
Yeah, we size the septic, he sized the septic for 30 bedrooms, yeah,
Mhm.
under that provision.
Your home is on what street, ma'am?
Fall Street, it's gonna be right on the corner of where they're talking about building, because I'm that last house on Fall Street, or the beginning house on Fall Street. So I would be abutting the property that he's talking about building, because where he's building, it abuts Fall Street and Spring Street.
Do you have solar panels on your roof?
Yep. So my property goes right up to Spruce Street, the one that, Spring Street, the one that they wanna bring all the way down in. So all their extra traffic is gonna be going onto my street and abutting my property, my neighbor's property, and all the extra flow of issues are gonna be coming into my yard.
I appreciate that, but that street could go through there at any given
I
time.
know that,
You
and
know that.
I've always known that, and at one point in time, I was trying to get my abutters to buy the property, buy that paper road. And the only person who wouldn't was the gentleman who used to own the property out on Cranberry Highway. He wouldn't pitch in with the rest of us to buy it, because otherwise,
It's 9,000
we
square
would've
feet.
bought it. So, and then unfortunately, he passed,
Yeah, it looks.
he gave it to his inheritance, and then she sold it.
But I asked the question earlier, how many entrances were going to be in? I thought you said Spring Street, Spruce Street, and then Summer Street. Was Fall Street even an entrance into the property?
No, but when you complete that road all the way through, it will be.
Fall Street comes down to your house, right?
Yep.
So
My
if you-
house is the first house on Fall Street.
That's right, well, we're looking at them. So if you run Spring Street right up all the way through, they'd have to tie that in, so.
I think the difference is, you're identifying it as Summer Street.
Oh, Fall Street is Summer Street?
Yeah, if you carry Fall Street all the way through, you've,
Summer Street is like the end of the street that he's going to continue it to.
oh, you've skipped over. On this plan, on your plan, you've jumped right over Fall Street. You've gone from Spruce to Summer. I think that should have been, Summer should have been labeled Fall, I think.
That's my mistake then.
Yeah.
That is my mistake.
So you wanna end it at Fall Street? then?
Yes,
Yes.
that's where the property ends.
Right.
Summer goes back another block.
Summer goes back another block,
Right,
yeah.
Summer Street goes back
Yeah,
another
yeah.
block.
That was a typo on our fault.
Right.
That is my mistake.
So then you're right, ma'am, then what would happen is your street would be the next exit in and out, instead of a bypass street.
Right,
The
and,
way, the way I heard them speaking is they were gonna bring it all the way up to Summer,
which is the next block up.
which is the next block
Right,
up,
which is where the paper road technically ends.
technically ends, right?
Right,
So they're making it better for you.
No, actually,
No.
that was not our intent.
no.
No,
Our
they-
intent is to end
Yeah,
at Fall
so,
Street.
so that block, you'll be changing this plan, if this goes through, you'll be changing this plan to show you ending at Fall Street.
Yes.
I'll be relabeling Summer Street. Fall
Because
Street.
what,
Shown here as Summer Street
He shows
is
this
Fall
as Summer
Street, it
Street,
sounds
that's
like.
not, that's really Fall Street.
because what happens now is we have problems with kids trying
Yes.
to race through
This is,
to go
this is what
through
she's talking about, this isn't.
on Spruce
This is
Street
the
now,
one right here.
on
This is-
Spring Street
Summer
rather.
Street's way up.
And because
This
when
is
they
what
find
they
out it's a dead
constructed.
end, they just
It's a paper street.
They
than
cut through
around.
your yard.
No, they stop and they just do a U-turn when they're trying to run from the cops, there's nowhere for them to go.
So they're gonna construct this right up to here.
Okay, so, I kinda thought we were getting a little more road out of you, but I guess not.
But she's
Okay.
worried about it.
So you're not in favor? 'Cause
No.
You think that it's wet in the back? I know Mr. Baptiste thinks it's wet in the back. Town engineer kinda alluded to the fact that he thinks it's wet in the back.
It
They,
is,
they need to do their due diligence for that.
and this is the neighbors that it's going to be right at their
Sure,
backyard.
we're gonna hear from them too. I'm just saying to you that the gentlemen have come in to ask the temperature of the room, the temperature of the town.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't come in with a full-scale set of drawings yet. They haven't spent the thousands of dollars that these engineers can
Topo
charge them
map,
to do all
there's your
this. So
elevations.
it's kind of a smart meeting to
So
come in and
this
get a
is,
feel of it. They already know they're not getting tense.
If they
So
were to
that's
come in
out.
105
before,
here.
like melted
Okay,
or
110.
after a heavy
So it's
rain,
dropping down, it goes right in this.
where
hole down.
Fall Street is, and
Yeah.
that property is, that whole area is nothing but slosh and mud.
This is all swamp down here.
It's also a dirt road, right?
Mine is-
There's no drainage there, right?
Right.
But that really
Well, the
wouldn't
other thing we
affect
could
them, it
do,
would
if
affect
we-
their
If we
septic.
go down to the number, and we go to
This whole area
three-unit
is-
buildings, for his suggestion, we don't have to go all the way to Fall Street. We don't have to pave all the way through to Fall Street, because now we're just in a smaller location, smaller footprint, we can come in and out in spring.
Well, let's hear from the other neighbors, I guess.
The only other thing I would want you guys to really consider is the traffic that Perry's creates in the summertime, because that is an issue pulling in and out of the
Oh,
neighborhood.
if they open up Fall Street, it'd be better for you. You don't have to go by Perry's. You can come out the other way.
Yeah, but even so, because a lot of people do come in like that part
Oh,
of.
Perry
to
can
get to
stack up the
neighborhood.
cars the long way. They
Yeah,
can go
but
the other way.
what I'm saying is coming in from Cranberry Highway,
I know what you're saying.
it's just a traffic issue as it is. So when even most of the neighborhood will already use that part of, to come in,
Did you ever, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
It's just a question of personal, did you go to any of the, when they were building Walmart and Target, did you ever go to those meetings? The engineers sat at the table and said, there'll be no more traffic.
Oh,
There'll
yeah.
be no traffic
well,
problem.
that's like the big deal.
So,
There's
so,
gonna be no congestion
I
all
know,
the way
but
to
we made a
Boston.
lot of money in there, so I can't criticize it. You know, these guys come in, they're building 6 units, 8 units, 10 units, whatever the case may be with some of these builders. And the neighbors get worked up that it's gonna be more traffic. I sat through 2 years of hearings listening to Walmart and all these, there'd be no traffic. People are crazy, there'd be no more cars. We did counts. They did counts Christmas week in Wareham. I said, come in July 4th. 15,000 cars to 60,000 cars. And what application did we get? We got the December application, but we're all stupid.
Oh, what about
So-
Cranberry Festival?
So I can same thing, make the, there'll be no traffic, 6 cops to block the highway. Well, listen, that's a nice enjoyable day, I like going down to that festival. But anyway,
Me too.
I just want you to know that 6, 8, 10, whatever units that they may get if they stay with the development, it's gonna cause some cars for you, but it's not gonna put Cranberry Highway out of business.
Oh, no, I know,
You know,
but
and
it's-
Perry's could care less about the traffic, you see
Oh.
that, he jams them in, God bless him, I hope he makes millions, but it's tough on the neighborhood.
Right.
But I don't think adding 6, 8, 10 houses is gonna quit Cranberry Highway, it's gonna be tough on you now, cause you'll have cars down in your neighborhood that you never had, but
now it'll be tough
you
on
know,
others.
I built on Charge Pond when I first moved here 30 years ago. 18 houses, now there's 60. It's a 4-mile dead end, and I can't get over the traffic. I can't believe it. And I leave 4:15, 4:30 in the morning, and there's cars coming both ways at me on a dead end. It's amazing. So, you're gonna get some cars one way or the other, there's nothing we can do about it. Whether he builds one house or 10, so.
Can I ask your first concern with notification was, did you feel that not all the abutters were properly notified?
Yes.
Is that what your concern was?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay,
because
well,
I know it's, has to be certified, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I mean, not one of us received it.
You didn't get certified?
No, on
Nothing?
On October 19th, nothing, no, and I have a post office
No.
Not
notice.
October 19th, because that was a ZBA situation.
Right,
This is the
not
planning
one,
board.
not one of us
Did you
got
get
it.
notified
On October 26th was the first one we got,
for the planning board,
for
certified?
this meeting.
Okay.
What's your address?
3 Fall Street. That was the first one we got. There was no letter that was sent back. There was no notice in my mailbox ever for October 19th.
Okay, well, you got a
Well-
notice for tonight, because you're sitting here. And it's their first time that I've seen these three, so.
The October meeting didn't happen, so they, they probably determined that before the cards went out.
But the thing was, if it did happen on October 19th, I wouldn't have gotten it, and I wouldn't have had a chance to be here, and that's the thing that really ticks me off.
What I was saying is, if they had proceeded, you would have received it, but they've changed their mind prior to mailing these out. If you weren't notified, the hearing wouldn't have been opened. If these cards weren't here, or some sort of proof that you had received a mailing,
But I received the second one, and it was for the same mailing. That's when I was here.
there's only one that goes out. We don't do two.
I don't have the ZBA file here, so I can't
The
tell
second
what
notice went out, so that's when I came.
the notices that were sent out then. All I have is the planning board.
Because I have the 2 letters. I have the 2 letters in here. I have a picture of both letters. The one I received for the October 26th and the one I received for this one.
I believe, I mean, the question is, were you notified of tonight's meeting?
Yes,
Okay, so now we're in front of the planning board, you were notified, so that's why we're here. Prior to that, it was ZBA, it was withdrawn without prejudice. There was notifications that went out, but our position is we're not responsible for the mailing.
no, I understand that, but the way the letters were written, there were crazy dates on them, and whoever's sending out the letters, they're not sending them out properly. That's my whole thing, because can I just show you? Because they're conflicting both of them, and that's where the problem is, because it's misrepresenting, like, say, you, as well as misrepresenting the town. See, here's the first letter. See, it says first notice, October 19th. It says second notice, October 26th, and that's the one I came to. That's the one I had notice for.
Those the newspaper notices?
Nope,
or
Yeah.
this is the notice, if you see it's folded, and this is the one I got in the mail.
Zoning Board of Appeals.
Yep, okay.
We never even
Those
went
dates
before
listed on the
zoning
notice are
board.
the
Right,
advertised
on October
dates, right?
26th.
I'm not
the
sure
one I
which
came
dates
from,
she's
that's the one
referring
with
to,
proof
actually.
on.
I think it's these.
The first notice and the second notice?
Yeah.
That's the newspaper.
Yeah, those are the,
These were the notices, these were the
Those are the
notices
dates
that we
of
got in the mail.
but those reference the dates the ad was in the newspaper.
But those are the notices that were sent to the abutters.
Yes, and that's what it was required. The notices were advertised in the paper as well, too, and the dates of those notices were specified.
And then see, here's the zoning plan. But if you're saying that we're supposed to be notified, then
That's when it went in the newspaper on the 16th and the 23rd. I don't know when you were notified for the,
this is the one we got 2 weeks ago.
But if you look at the first line of the advertisement, it says a public hearing will be held on December 11th.
Right,
that's the one you
Right.
got for this. So you were properly notified for this
Right.
meeting?
yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
My name is Joe Tavares, and I live at Summer Street. The back of my property is gonna abut the back of this project here.
Right.
And there is a lot of water back there. Even getting water down my basement and all that. I have one main question for this board. In 2005, I tried to put an addition in my house, and the plan had a front door. And I was denied without even talking about it, because it became a duplex. Because that complex was only allowed to have single-family homes. Now, I ask you, how you want to put 5 duplexes in one compound when you denied me?
The planning board denied you in '05, or the zoning board denied you in '05?
I was trying to put an addition in my house.
I know, but which board did you go to?
I don't know which board it was, but irrelevant. I was told that in the Sunny Acres, you can only have single homes. I had to change my plan because I had a front door, and it became a duplex because they would have 2 front doors, and I was not allowed to have that, which it wasn't a problem for me. I changed that. Now you're telling me that you want to put up 5 duplexes, and then you're changing it to 3 families, 9 3-families. I mean,
No, not 9. I cut down one, by going to 3 buildings, you cut down 1 family. But
How big is your lot?
how big is my lot? My lot is just about 3/4 of an acre, just under it. It's gonna, my lot ends on Fall Street. But my question is, why was I denied? And we're even considering this now. Because that's supposed to be a single-family area.
It's a duplex.
Did you apply for a building permit with the building inspector? Is that what?
My house was there already. I just
know.
wanted to put an addition.
Is the building inspector the one who denied you?
The building inspector,
That's where he's talking.
it's really irrelevant. The building inspector made me put a front door, okay? He said I had to have a front door, so I changed my plan and I put a front door. So then I come to the meeting and the meeting says, no, we can't give it to you because now it's a duplex because it has a front door. So, but my question is, if I'm not allowed to have a duplex, why are we even considering this? Because that's supposed to be a single-family area.
Not sure of the situation in your project. If you're still interested in proceeding,
Is
well,
that,
can you come into the office and?
is that not a single-family area?
No, it's a multi-residence, MR30 district.
That's changed then, because I was denied a front door, because it was a duplex. It would've become a duplex.
Well, I'd like to know
That
more.
gentleman was on the board. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
I was on zoning in '05.
You were actually very nice to me. I thank you.
Look at that.
But I remember you being on that board there.
That couldn't have been him.
Yeah. Irrelevant. I was denied that because it was a duplex, is my question. And why, why now can we have duplexes?
I would say at some point during the time that this subdivision was created and now, it was changed,
2005, my plan,
but your lots were created long before that.
yes.
And since then, it's been changed to MR30, which means multiple residential, 30,000 square feet minimum. As you can see, when you look through your subdivision, there's lots anywhere from, well, they were probably all in the 9,000 and 10,000 square foot range, and some of them have been combined. If I'm looking at the right piece of property, you probably have 4 or 5 lots combined to make your lot.
I have just under 3/4. I end up on Fall Street, from Summer Street. I start on Summer Street, and I go all the way back to Fall Street.
Well, I don't think that's happened since 2005, but, and again, I don't know the circumstances that you went through back then, but that did change the neighborhood to multiple residential.
When did that change?
I don't know that.
Don't have history. But if you want to come in, if you could come into the office, I'd like to go over your file and see what the record shows about what happened. And maybe we can figure something out.
I'm very disturbed over this, because I was denied stuff, and now we're doing stuff that I was denied.
We're not doing it yet.
Huh?
We're not doing it yet.
No, well,
I'm sorry.
not saying that, but,
Were you going for a multifamily?
no, I wasn't going for.
You just were adding a front
Was that
door,
done
so
in
you weren't,
2006?
your request was not the same as his.
Addition on my house,
Right.
okay?
Because there were pockets of, this was all,
Building inspector, not the one we have now, the previous one, stopped my project. He says, you need to put a front door.
Right.
Even though I had a back door, and, on the addition, he says, you need to put a front door. So the carpenters had to cut the wall and put a front door. So then I needed a special permit because I was gonna put an extra kitchen in there. I mean, this is the kind of runaround I got.
All right, now an extra kitchen, that makes it a duplex.
But I couldn't have a duplex.
I understand that,
Is this Bessie's Brook?
I can't remember back to '05.
But
I don't
that's-
remember meeting
That's
you.
my question to you. If I cannot have a duplex, because I was told that was a single family site.
was that part of the zoning rewrite? I know there was clusters of, it's,
I was just looking at the history in the back, George. There's a lot of stuff that was done, part of the MR 30 district. It references districts A and D. A and D went out the window years ago. So it might behoove you to research exactly what you've got to be working with, especially in light of the fact that I know you were looking to see if there was additional land that had to be added to the lot if you went to a third unit.
mhm.
I remember exactly what you're talking about, but I don't see it anywhere in this book now. So I don't know whether those changes were made or not, or what the ultimate result was. But before you decide, maybe it would be a good idea to get some research on it to be sure. Then you'd have something to hang your decision on.
Plus, we need to check with the wetlands, because if I even wanna have a cookout out there, I gotta check with the, you know, with the wetlands, so. I'm sorry. But it's,
Where is the, you know what, where is the concrete place?
the concrete place is
Way over
down
here.
the street on Summer Street. If you go down Summer Street, that's the back of the concrete place.
It's beyond all of that.
So it's not on here.
It's at the
Where's
end of
West Cranberry
Summer.
Highway?
So here's Cranberry Highway.
Oh, it's right there.
2728, John.
Right there.
That could be part of the back lot.
No, Byther's place was beyond that, and then you come to Highway
This is
Concrete.
2728 on that gray one.
Yeah.
See the two big lots, John, to your left?
Where the circle is on.
Right there, that's it.
The circle on Summer Street.
Yep,
That's the back,
that's the back of it.
okay, and that's what floods back there.
This is all highway concrete.
That's
That
highway
floods
concrete.
back there.
Hey,
I've looked back there
They
on
developed this land.
bad days, and they
Is
got
this all wet?
concrete
This-
blocks
this is
piled
actual
up.
concrete in here. Really?
That was up
That's
3-4
it.
feet on that
This is
block.
all wet.
But the back
There's,
of our
there's
lot.
floods
is
before that.
Well, there's a brook right over here.
Because when I put a garage in my thing, and I had to get a zoning thing that I just made it not, and I'm talking, I'm on way down on Summer, I'm not anywhere near that corner.
We'll get a wetlands determination through the
Yeah,
conservation.
you'll have to, the more you start thinking about that, that's why I asked where that was, because I know how deep that water gets in the back of that lot.
permit.
Where they paved back there,
Doesn't
they
have to
just
come
threw a
back for
block.
site plan?
Bone dry,
It's under 30
summertime, you
acres.
get 3-4 feet
It's
of
got
water
9
back.
parking
Now,
spaces.
that's back behind you.
That's generally commercial, the
Yeah,
reference to this,
commercial.
to the parking
Alright.
spaces.
So you're against it also?
That's true.
Other than single
thought he
family
was
or
for it.
two-family.
I thought he was for it. He
No.
just wanted to get his two-family in.
All for it.
Is that, well, can you clarify that for us?
I'm sorry. I am against
Are you
it.
opposed to this?
I am-
Two scenarios.
I am against this.
Because you were disapproved on your
I
two-family?
was disapproved, plus all the other stuff that's coming into there, water. I already had to put a French drain in my house and all that because of all the water, that, it cost me thousands. It's not your problem, it's mine, you know what I mean? But I have to do that because,
So you believe this type of development would aggravate the,
I believe it would aggravate it, yes. It would aggravate my land, and it definitely would aggravate me personally. And I would like to follow up
Please do,
with this gentleman,
please do come into the planning office.
because
but I just want to understand your intent with following up. Is it to pursue a two-family?
Well, I think we have to do a little research here to make sure that what we are telling you is accurate and within our jurisdiction. It would seem as though the 5 duplexes would be pushing it in any event. But I think we need to do a little homework to make sure we got the right regulation in place and we're enforcing it.
Who would determine that, Mr. Chairman?
Well, we gotta go back through some of the documentation, some of the acts that we're taking to make sure we're working on the right information.
So do you want to continue the meeting?
Yes, what's our next date?
January.
And you've already purchased this, or you're planning on purchasing?
I have it under agreement, ready to close on it as soon as I can get a determination.
You don't want to do it December 25th?
No, I don't think so.
I'm not
The
coming in.
January 8th.
Won't we need to hear from conservation before we can even, regardless of the zoning?
Conservation would be making a determination, what would,
This is the lot that's in, is that you there?
Yes.
that would,
Okay.
I mean, honestly, if we
Thought this was-
continued
I
that
thought this
road,
was Pine Street.
connected
It's just on this-
to Fall
This is Summer,
Street,
but I thought
whatever
this
that
little
street
road
is.
here was Pine
if we
Street.
put drainage in the road, that's
maybe it
definitely gonna
changes,
help the
I-
water situation in the area.
mhm.
But this is mine right here, so this is where they're gonna be. So all this traffic,
Where do you get wet, right here?
yeah, all this.
So our next meeting will be January 8th.
January
all
8th.
affecting you
Okay,
here, too.
so what we'll do is we'll contact conservation right away and see if we can get something set up with them, right? Get some kind of
He's gotta
determination
stop
going.
over here,
He
beyond,
doesn't
beyond
have to.
Fall.
When you come back,
If he comes down here, and
please
he's got his frontage, he can stop
consider
so you don't get any traffic.
But you can't get out if you do that. You gotta back up and do a U-turn.
How do you get out there now?
Sure,
blank walls.
Me?
sure.
I get off on Summer Street here. But these guys that come here, they have to go over here, because if they come down here, this is all woods.
Okay.
You gotta do it.
Neighboring, with this, the closest house, existing house.
This is gonna be- this was-
That's supposed to be Fall Street.
We got the right guy here,
Ascertain
now,
the
215,
impact
okay,
the
1020.
your project
it's,
would have on the
Mr.
neighboring
Taraz,
houses.
which is this guy right here.
From what I see
This
here,
one here, he's still showing Richard Blythe,
they
it's
are
the same lot.
modest looking single.
This was the A and R we approved.
You need to be sure that the
The
scale
same
is
as
not
gold.
out of whack.
That's the wrong
Oh,
one.
no, definitely not.
Wrong.
It's definitely not out of whack. And we're under the
Well,
lot coverage number.
It's any
But please
difference.
show us.
Yeah, sure. We'll show you elevations, and Mark will be in contact with you. My brother will be in contact and get you some plans with more elevations he's asking for. And we'll go to the next meeting and see where we go from there.
Okay, can I have you sign an extension?
Sure.
Requires an extension.
Oh, shit, I forgot that was tonight. I recorded it this morning because I knew I would forget tonight.
No, you need to stay here to make sure we don't change our minds.
8:30 or 8:20?
Do a vote right now, right?
Correct.
10 minutes, people.
So you're gonna get a determination on
The zoning. There was a determination. made by the
25,000 to have a duplex.
building commission.
But when it referenced,
So what we do,
Well, he is 70,000 square feet on that particular lot.
the letter is in here.
Mr. Chairman,
can I get a motion to continue to the 8th? Go ahead.
The two,
the determination, is that something that would be available prior to the next meeting, so we know how to proceed?
As soon as we get to it, yeah, as soon as we get the answers we need, we could
All right,
copy you.
thank you.
He's got all your contact information, correct?
Right,
Yeah, as soon as we know, we can let you know.
okay, thank you.
the thing is, under special consideration, he's
So when is the continuation to when?
January 8th.
that's what he, yes, he can.
Okay, so you need a motion
Well,
for that?
that's what they're gonna.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we continue this hearing until January 8th.
Second.
And this is under,
No more notices, January 8th.
I got it. I already heard it, it's already my calendar. I'll be here.
was there a second?
Yes, there was.
Any discussion? All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We'll see you then.
Thank you very much.
Now, you've got the workshop listed as a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be workshops.
So Article 3, table 321, Charlie, 5 or more family residential use within new structures permitted by special permit.
Well, one question would be, they're referring to dwelling units or the structures?
5 or more family residential use within new structures is permitted by special permit.
Structures.
That's 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag.
Well, that's what he wants to know is how, if it's too much for them.
Well, if you read it, that each unit adds 15,000 square feet,
Yeah, I do.
You know, you said you wanted to follow up on it.
Yeah, right.
I'm real interested, because I'd like to hear your explanation. And I'll buy it, you know what I'm saying?
Well, what I wanna do is look up the file and see actually what was done,
It's just,
because it doesn't seem to make as much sense to me.
may I have your contact or something, how I can get it?
and it's the other building, this town hall.
It's in the, yeah, it's in
I
the,
got a car, I can drive out of town, you know?
no, it's right next to
Yeah. City Hall, right.
Well, Jasmine.
Still got your door?
I'm sorry?
Still got your front door?
I wasn't allowed to put a front door.
Yeah, but did you keep it?
No.
No, we didn't want one anyway, because I didn't want
Oh,
one.
they told you had to have the front
We
door,
only
okay,
wanted
I got
an
you.
I didn't want one to
Yeah.
begin with.
That was the Board of Appeals that,
Phone number,
Wasn't
extension,
Ted back that long?
that's the address and my name.
Was that Ted, Miziazek?
Right.
There was a lot of interpretation on duplexes back then, I'll agree.
He just
But usually,
He just stopped my job.
usually the addition of a kitchen, you can allow a bathroom, but a kitchen usually triggers what's a duplex or not. But that interpretation has changed many times over the years.
Telling us we have to put a door, and another inspector telling us, no, you can't have a door.
I'd never heard the door before, unless
We were like,
they were looking for a second egress or a better egress, you know.
I mean,
Yeah, forget that.
I mean, we're settled, we don't need anything now, but
Okay.
I don't want,
I would just,
I don't want that.
Don't
in
have
my
a cold,
house.
do you?
didn't understand why I wasn't allowed to have one, and now
they wanna put
I
five.
see this.
You know, it just
This is
doesn't-
what triggered all this, and I'm not looking to make a big deal out of this anymore, even make anything out of it.
Well,
because I'm
there was a zoning change done
There've been a lot of zoning changes.
in that time frame where, you know, Cranberry Highway, 500 feet in, used to be strip commercial.
that's
And-
how the garage got put in there.
And they got,
Yeah,
Rochester
Grant-
used to live.
Grant built my house.
but in 2005-ish, 6-ish,
Yeah.
they identified what was actually on the ground, like in your area it was residential, so they made a pocket of residential along there, and commercial and residential. So,
That map you gentlemen have, I think from Fall Street to Summer Street, don't quote me. Town planner, I understand, you're the
That's
town
right.
planner or the engineer.
Paper Street.
I think that's Pine Street.
We rose to Ninth Street.
On my plans, for my house, it shows it's Pine Street, so I don't even know who's drawing this stuff.
Pine Street goes back to the original subdivision that George Wallace Byther and
So was that,
somebody else did.
was that name changed?
Goes back to the 40, oh yeah.
Oh, so the name was changed.
Because
Oh,
my house was built in 92, and on my plan, it shows as Pine Street.
It goes back to the original subdivision.
Oh, we can
All
discuss
these
it.
things, and
Yeah.
I'm like so
Later.
confused here, you know, it just, but anyway,
Yeah.
thank you, thanks for your input.
good night.
Right.
All right. We have,
I thought that was him, but I've only met him once.
What town?
That's the way
All right, next item on the agenda was the planning board workshop.
mhm.
And what I want to do is go over some possible zoning bylaw amendments. Ask for your opinion as to what we should be taking forward into town meeting, spring town meeting, or what we should be postponing for later. So I have a handout that's in your folders. And the first one is on recreational marijuana establishments. As you may recall, we placed a moratorium on marijuana establishments until June 30 of this year. And we'll be having to consider the marijuana establishments in the upcoming town meetings. One thing we can do is to set the number of establishments. We can also set the type of establishment. We can have a set location for the establishments. And we could even prohibit recreational marijuana. That would require a town meeting action and a townwide ballot vote to affirm or reject this action because the town voted to legalize marijuana in the original statewide ballot.
They voted to legalize it,
Right,
and then we put a moratorium on it?
a moratorium because we're waiting for the regulations to be put into place.
Okay.
Who's the licensing authority? Board of Selectmen? Local licensing authority, or has that been taken away?
I'm not clear on that point. I think one of the things we can consider is if there is an allowance for marijuana establishments, that the law authorizing the imposition of a tax be included in the town meeting warrant as well.
Alan, is it the intent, or, I know it's still in the works, but would the Board of Selectmen be the licensing authority for these establishments?
No,
So it's gonna be dictated by the
it's gonna be,
Control Commission?
it's gonna be dictated by the Cannabis Control Commission, which I think went from 5 members, they increased it. The license will be issued as of April 1st for retail.
And you can limit it to a percentage of your
Yes,
liquor licenses or your package store licenses?
that's right. You can limit it to less than 20% of the number of package stores in town,
And
the
that,
off-premise licenses. So that would mean since there are 13 package store licenses that have been issued in town, that would mean 2.6 possible recreational facilities,
Get a drink anyway.
which would mean 2.
Actually, might mean 3, because it's over half.
Well, it says less than 20%.
All this is up in the air with the Attorney General's office, just so you know.
So what we're doing is we're trying to shoot at something that's a moving target at this point, but our moratorium is over June 30. So I think it might be appropriate to consider something.
no more than one per zoning district, max of 3?
Whatever you set will have to basically be vetted by the Attorney General, and you could also end up, the cities and towns in Massachusetts, because there's a ballot question, could also end up in a potential court case as well. Because Wareham voted for by a substantial margin, we may have issues. The Attorney General has given us some recommendations with no guarantee. The towns that voted no have the right because of the ballot question to pass a town meeting, no retail, et cetera. Prohibition. We, as a town, can try it, but then we'll have to go for a ballot question later in order to get that, then we try the prohibition. And most likely, because we voted for it, it will never pass.
Again, I just threw that out as a starting point, just
You can
get the
do
ball rolling here.
You can do within certain things. Ken has the guidelines, what they're trying to do. MMA is basically giving you the same information. But at the end of the day, because we passed by ballot, it's questionable what's gonna happen at the end. You could extend the moratorium till December 31st too, I believe, if they accept it. And then the Attorney General is not 100% sure they can accept that either.
So that's an option as well that I didn't put down, was to extend the moratorium to a further date.
And
And I believe if whatever you do, you have to have a, if I understand it from the Assistant District Attorney, Margaret Hurley, I believe as long as you have a public hearing before April 1st, it becomes effective as far as if you want to call it a grandfather date. It does, because town meeting doesn't come to the fourth week in April. So if you do something well before April 1st as a public hearing, that means you've noticed the changes. And once it passes town meeting, if it does pass, it's effective as far as anybody's concerned, back when you had your public hearing. Just so you know.
What happens
That's
if you
right, that's
continue
under-
if you continue this until December, what happens?
You still have to have a public hearing,
You still have to have a public hearing, so.
because if you do nothing and wait till town meeting with you have to have a public hearing anyways for this. So you want to have your public hearing as soon as possible and get it dialed in and at least get it in there.
What, do you recall what the surrounding towns voted for?
I don't have off the top of my head there, but I think a lot of the towns around us voted yes, and there are a few that voted no. They're not a lot. I think there was, I'm probably wrong, I think there was 3 that just passed at their town meetings, or they had special fall town meetings for the prohibition. I think there may have been 13 total. It's not a lot.
we can argue whether it's good or this or that, but better off we get prepared, because you know it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
I'd
need
like
to-
to
you
throw
need
the
to do
whole thing
something.
out the window and ban it, but since it's here, you might as well at least get some taxation out of it.
Plus, only that is you need to do something, because the retail could right now be located anywhere. You have nothing, so you have to put something in.
So that's why I tossed that out as a starting point. I don't know, haven't looked at a zoning map to see how that would spread out, but it would at least,
Well,
not end,
I think what you
not end up a stone's throw from each other.
Yeah, well, if you're only talking about 2, which is a possibility, then you're limiting pretty much to a couple of locations, so you can think about whether or not it's in the commercial, general commercial, or strip commercial, or institutional as the medical marijuana facilities.
You can also be more finite than that if you want. You can make locations in Pacific, you can describe an area, it doesn't have to be just general commercial. You could have Wareham Crossing say is okay, and this is just thought, I've never spoke to anybody, and then you could also have, Rosebrook.
Oak Street.
No, Oak Street, they might actually get one in there. But you can pick places where, I won't get into details, but there's things you can do.
We put it right across from the police station.
Mr. Chris would be very happy to do that.
As long as he can have a drive-through.
I don't think so.
I don't think you want to do that.
Well, we need an occupant for the Old Benny store, so we can have the Old Benny store.
So in terms of the options, in terms of saying number and being specific about location and what the conditions of approval are, you're skipping over the prohibition. One option you have is you can provide to town meeting the vote to do the option for prohibition and allow town meeting to make that choice as to whether or not they want to go to a general ballot. As well as having a more specific zoning articles that specify the type of establishments and the location of those establishments. Would you like to give town meeting an option, or do you want to make a more of an informed choice?
Somebody said something about institutional.
That's where medical marijuana is allowed.
I understand that, but is that in addition to these 2 that might be approved?
There's some
Medical
There's
is
some
separate.
talk that the medical marijuana establishments would get first consideration on recreational. But I don't think that's been finalized yet. So if you, like, to say one in each zoning district, you could have 3 on Main Street, because you've got institutional, Wareham Village, and Wareham Village 2. So I think I need to look at it differently, because that's what I'm trying to avoid, have them all in one concentrated location.
Option 2.
You could treat it like adult entertainment and just allow it in one district.
You took that out. That's gone now, isn't it?
No,
It's still over in the,
Industrial park.
but then they put in the daycare center, which means you couldn't do it. I think you got a paving guy there, I think he tried to do
There are gonna be other standards set by the Cannabis Control Commission. That will specify where an establishment can be located. As a separation from schools and some other institutions.
So what do you wanna know, option, you want an option?
No, I don't think you have to pick an option now.
what's the criteria for kids walking to school? Is that a mile and a half?
uphill in the rain.
So,
Can we specify the locations?
Yes, we can.
I would make a motion, we specify Wareham Crossing and Rosebrook Place. Not a motion, but I can throw out for consideration.
Why such a dense retail space?
It's closer to Blackmore Pond area.
Yeah, first of all, I don't want I'll put a moratorium on here to 30/30 right now. I'm so opposed to this, but I like this thought with the schools. I mean,
they get the licenses?
no. But a 5-mile radius from any school, that pretty much tells them they can be in the middle of a
And
cranberry
Wareham
bog
Place is
somewhere
out,
along 495.
Wouldn't make it. It's right down the street.
If the schools all get consolidated here, how many what do we got? Deacon's, Minot, and then this complex here? Is that what we're limited to for schools now?
Yep.
So, and you're saying walking distance is 1 mile, you think?
For a school bus, yeah, anything less than a mile, I think they have to walk.
What's the distance from Deacon's to this location? It's gotta be 2.5 miles? So, less money?
As the crow flies.
No, Deacon's is a lot closer than a mile to Wareham Crossing. That's what you mean.
No, I'm saying if you put a radius around Deacon's of 2 miles and put a radius around this campus of 2 miles and put a radius around Minot of 2 miles, they couldn't be at Cranberry Crossing. It would push them to the Cranberry Highway as an option. This way they can get hit right on the murder road down there. Or they're gonna have to be on the other side of Cranberry Highway somewhere. My personal thoughts is the moratorium, because we shouldn't be the first mover on this and see what other communities are doing.
You have communities that are embracing this and can't wait for the tax money, just so you know.
Well, if you're gonna suggest something like a moratorium or a prohibition, I think you need to have something else in your back pocket, because if one fails, you won't be able to do anything till October.
And just so you understand, at town meeting, to pass something where the town has said they want this, you have to realize your opportunity that's getting turned down at town meeting, you probably get a pretty good response of people coming in to vote against whatever you're gonna propose.
Yeah, that'll be the one town meeting they all show up to, right? So, I think if we think about youth for a minute and say, where are these kids hanging out? They're hanging out at Cranberry Crossing. Any one of these multiple retail locations, I don't think is a good option. It should be an isolated location, which,
Wicked's Island.
Where?
Wicked's Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's privately owned now, can't do that.
Got the fundraiser for the coalition.
I don't think that's gonna work either.
Okay, well,
We can joke
Pick
all
something
you
and
want,
move
but
along here.
It has to be a standalone establishment. You know, pick any one of the standalones along Cranberry Highway. It shouldn't go into the Stop and Shop Plaza, it shouldn't go into Wareham Crossing, you know, anywhere where there's a lot of foot traffic, that's worse than a school, as far as I'm concerned, moving around. Because you know the retail guy's just gonna let anyone in. We're not gonna be able to police this any better than we can police the sale of alcohol. We're gonna put a sign in the window and tell them they gotta be 18 years old. 21 to buy this stuff, and who's gonna, you know, as soon as nobody's looking, they're selling it to everyone they want. So why not isolate this in a way that it's a burden for somebody under 21 to get there, especially a 15-year-old, 16-year-old? And it stands out very obvious. So it has to be within,
Well, I think,
right across from the courthouse, another good, police station doesn't want to put it right across from the courthouse.
I think if you go with option 2, making it, setting the limit on the number, and then deciding where it could be, it might be by special permit. The only thing is special permit, you'd have to have really strict criteria that would give you the ability to
Well,
deny.
the
'Cause
the
generally,
marijuana
special
commission
permit's considered
is
a,
gonna set what they need for requirements for.
That's right, you're gonna
security
get
and
state
everything else.
regulations in place.
So why dictate to say, hey, you only can go in this building or whatever? Let them go in a certain district and let the commission dictate what goes on after that. The business is gonna dictate itself where it's gonna go or how they're gonna survive. It's just like a package store, you know,
So
package store
just
goes where they think they can
any
make it.
particular district you would support?
Any way they wanna put it. Let the commission handle it any other way.
And just limit it to 2 or 3?
option 2, limits it to no more than 3.
The number of units, right, let them fight over it, that's all.
And what is that, Alan? We gotta come up with something for a public hearing before town meeting.
you have to have a public hearing anyways for the,
Right.
These are all questions about which you wanna take to a public hearing.
yeah, you're gonna have to take something to a public hearing,
Okay.
so you have to make a
Well, if you're
decision.
not specifying a district, then the date of the public hearing doesn't really impact you that much.
Well, as long as it's before town meeting and before April 1st.
Okay,
Option 2 looks good.
I like option 2. Put it-
You know, it's like package stores and used car lots, we got plenty of them.
Hey, we got a big car lot. That's coming
That's
down.
coming, yeah. It's coming.
Well, what we can do is we can start with option 2 and take it to a public hearing. We'll draft up something that fits with, that allows you to have a discussion on it. And decide from there. I believe it's February that we're looking for articles for town meeting.
Is there a commission in place now?
Yes,
There is.
it's up
They're
and
having a lot
running
of
and they're
meetings this week.
meeting and it's really active. They're working at it.
You guys pass some samples around at the meeting, or?
Oh, yeah. We have those little candy things, you just throw them to everybody.
Straight out the line.
Oh, gummy bears,
Oh, gummy bears are really good.
All right, if
Yeah.
we can continue on.
Yeah, next.
Article 13, non-conforming lots, uses, and structures. Asked Dave Requena to come in tonight to discuss it. This is on everything non-conforming, pre-existing non-conforming. And it drives the agenda of the Board of Appeals on a regular basis. And puts
I was gonna give it to Cronin also.
a question as to the impact on different neighborhoods. Thinking of Shangri-La under the R130 zoning district. It has substantially larger setbacks, dimensional requirements, lot sizes than what's been historically developed in that area. That's that dense gray area up in the right-hand corner of the zoning map over there. And with the difficulty in going through the pre-existing non-conforming special permit review, it puts a cost burden and a time burden on some things that probably don't need to go through that process. So, they could be provided with an easier path of.
I thought we fixed the
improvements.
setbacks.
You did in one instance, but not in all cases.
Oh.
So, I asked Dave Requena to produce a new draft of what he thought was appropriate for Article 13 and the other sections that apply. And this is what you have before you at this point. And if,
So
go ahead.
these are your suggested changes, or?
Yes.
So maybe you could summarize them for us.
Yeah, sure. Good evening to the board. Wareham Building Commissioner Dave Requena. So we have gone through Article 13 just because of some persistent issues that constantly just seem to come up. Issues with applications. We seem to send a lot of people in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals in instances where it's not always necessary. Just like Ken had explained just a minute ago, houses in the R130, almost every lot in the R130 is under 10,000 square feet. At one point, I believe, around 1980 or so, right in that time frame, there was a change made. Actually, it was after that. There was a change made to 130,000 square feet. So that's for a new lot, but now you have entire neighborhoods with 8,000 to 10,000 square foot lots, and every change they want to make to their house requires Board of Appeals. So it adds a lot of cost, it adds a lot of time, it adds a lot of aggravation to people who bought what was, at the time, a lawfully conforming property. So we tried to make some changes to allow for certain things so that some of these people don't have to go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals for small changes to their property, like increases in deck size, small additions, enclosures of existing porches. In a lot of cases, people have to go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals just to reconstruct the porch. All right, so I try to look at things like if it were me, if I had to do that, I wouldn't necessarily be thrilled if I wanted to knock down a front porch of my house and rebuild it 6 inches bigger than what it is now. So in a nutshell, I mean, we've gone through and basically looked at the issues, like I said, that are constant issues, and just try to improve them in a sense, not to just allow everything, but to be a little bit more flexible where it's necessary, and a little stricter in other areas. So I mean, this draft is a rough draft in its true sense. Okay, it hasn't been formatted at all, but I mean, there's a lot of information in there as far as Article 13, non-conforming structures, uses, and lots. So I'm not sure if you've had a chance to go through that, but I mean, we're definitely open to suggestions.
So there's no grandfathering allowed, these people that own undersized lots?
There is grandfathering, but when it comes to zoning, grandfathering only really protects you on your lot. But once you put a structure on a lot, grandfathering basically goes out the window. So if you have a grandfathered lot, that's empty, just a vacant lot, that grandfathering protection basically guarantees you that that lot is gonna be buildable later on down the road, 20, 30, 40 years from now. But if you had a grandfathered lot in 85, put a house on it in 85, you now have a lawfully non-conforming structure, as long as it was permitted and everything was done properly. But any changes that you make to that structure after that require a special permit. Unless you wanna make a new non-conformity, then you have to go in front of the zoning board for additional relief. You need a variance and so on. So, once the structure is on the lot, it does require relief from the board unless we grant the permissions in the bylaw.
So the idea of putting on a deck, an unenclosed deck, putting in a swimming pool, could all require going before the zoning board of appeals.
Yeah.
Putting on dormers that don't go any higher than the roof, peak of the roof, or further out than the footprint of the building, could require going to the Board of Appeals. So some of these more de minimis changes, we think should be allowed to occur under an easier process, rather than the full-blown special permit or variance requirements.
I can just give you one quick example. If you go to page 2, where it says non-conforming structures, uses, and lots, under 1A, that says a lawfully pre-existing non-conforming single or two-family residential structure may be altered or extended by right if the building official determines that it meets the following criteria. A basically says that as long as the addition or extension itself meets current zoning requirements, so if you had a 10-foot side yard setback and you want to build an addition, as long as it meets all the setback requirements and the coverage requirements, then you're fine. B says, as long as the non-conformance concerns the size of the lot. The whole purpose of that is because of grandfathered lots. There is case law that has gone back and forth regarding whether the lot is grandfathered after you put a structure on it. So in some towns, in how our bylaw is written now, it could be interpreted to say that even though you have a conforming structure, in a sense that it meets all the setbacks and the coverages, you have an undersized lot, therefore you have a non-conforming structure. There's other case law, and I disagree with that. There is other case law that also votes against that. So this basically protects a person who bought a lot, put a house on that lot, it was conforming, everything conformed, but now the town changes the bylaw and says that now you need 130,000 square feet. In this case, as long as your lot conformed at the time and your house meets all other dimensional requirements, you can still add on to your house. You can put a porch on your house, you can add an addition to your house, you can add a bathroom. You can do all that stuff as long as it meets the dimensional requirements and protects your lot aside. It actually takes that lot requirement and pushes it aside and says, as long as you meet everything else, as long as you had a conforming lot at the time, you're fine today. And just that in itself is an issue that we run into constantly.
Would you take it further and say you can't, say, long time ago, side setback was 5 feet, and now, depending on where you are, it could be 10. If you were putting an addition on and you were going no closer to the sideline than the house is now, would you take it that far, or would you let that go to ZBA? You're not increasing.
How it's written here, that would actually go to the ZBA, because in Mass General Law and case law has proven that an expansion of a non-conforming structure is a special permit requirement. So if if the structure was less than what the required setback is, which I think that's what you're asking, if you required to have 10 and you only have 8, the expansion of that building, either horizontally or vertically, is an intensification of a non-conforming structure, and that requires a special permit statutorily.
Now, I was just thinking of, like, I know one house, they cut 2 feet off the porch rather than go through a hearing process, you know?
Yeah.
It looks silly, but,
Yeah, no, right. I mean, if you're expanding a building that's non-conforming, it requires a special permit so that all your neighbors have a say. Whether they have a standing or not, it's another story, but, and if they were conforming and wanted to make it non-conforming, then it would be a variance. But in a lot of instances where it's not an expansion, or you could fall under de minimis, which we've also tried to add that in here as well, just to allow certain things without going to the board.
well, that example would be easier for you than trying to learn what was existing at the time the structure was built, right? You get a house that's 75 years old and they want to go by what was in place then. There was nothing in place then, which your earlier comment said, regulation that was lawful at the time established. So,
Yep.
you know, this would be easier for you you could take a look at it and say, you're not making anything more non-conforming, and
Right. It would give me the first finding. Okay, so, but also, Mr. Chairman, to your point, one of the areas where we've become stricter in this bylaw is if a house was built prior to 1951, or if a lot was created prior to 1951, and I've had people tell me this, Ken and I just had this kind of talk the other day, but I've had people come in and tell me that they could build right out to the edges of the property line, and they can. Essentially, they can. We can't stop them, because if you have a grandfathered lot, you're only restricted by what was in place, which regulations were in place at the time the lot was created. So, and here in Wareham, if you had a lot created prior to 1951, then you essentially don't have any restrictions, and you could build to the property line. So we've added something in here that says that if you do have a lot in that instance that was created prior to 1951, that you have to conform to the first requirement of that zoning district. All right, so that people don't come in and build these mega mansions right out to the property lines. So, I mean, it does go both ways.
George, can I ask a question?
sure.
There were 2 zoning changes that I'm aware of for Shangri-La. The first one was the original zoning, which set it up for 6,500 square feet. And at that time, I think the front setback was 20, the sidelines were 10, maybe even the rear was 10. Then I believe it went to 10,000 square feet. And that's where you'll find some of the later subdivisions around that area, which were done back in the 60s and 70s, they were 10,000 square feet. Then I think it went to 30. And you'll find that there was the subdivision behind the market that's up there, I think those are 30,000 square foot lots. But the setbacks were still the same, 10 and 20. Why wouldn't it make sense to say that you maintain the setbacks that you have right now for any property that has to conform to current zoning, which is 3 acre, but to essentially grandfather, as you suggest, anything that's under the 3 acres back to the 10 and the 20?
I'm not sure I follow that.
Well, most of the issues that you run across in the agricultural district up there is that the setback is 100 feet in the front, and I think it's 100 feet on the sides, which you can't get when you got a 6,500 square foot lot like there are in some parts of Shangri-La.
Right.
But if you exempted all those lots that were less than the 3 acres from those setbacks of 100 and whatever the front is and whatever the year is, and go back to, maybe not the first one, but at least specify it to that it's a 10-foot sideline and it's a 20-foot front. That's the way it was when it was 6,500 square feet.
Right, that's actually what we're doing. We haven't exempted anything. We just want to give them, a lot of the houses that were built in Shangri-La were built prior to 1951. They really didn't have any regulation in place.
So
The
White
lots
Island-
are created prior to
Yeah,
that.
the White Island area, those go back to the teens, I think, in those little 25-foot land court lots.
Yep.
But if you start with when, can't remember the name of the guy now,
Carl Lynn.
Carl Lynn, when he started those lots, he started with the 6,500 square feet. And then it was upgraded to 10,000 and then 30 along the way. So anything other than what was the original White Island stuff, which was prior to 1951, came in after the zoning started.
Yep, so,
So-
I apologize. I wasn't sure.
No,
if you were finished.
no, it's okay.
Okay, so in order to address that, if you go to the very end of that packet, we did a little survey. And I went through and I did 15 to 20 properties of every lot size, 0 to 5,000, 5 to 10,000, and then 10 to 15,000 square feet. And I took a survey from every neighborhood that I could find in town that had these smaller lots. Parkhurst, all around Shangri-La, Cremisa, areas like that. And what I'm proposing that we do is do an FAR, floor area ratio in those areas, so that when they have a lot, and then take whatever setbacks were in place at the time, or as close as we can, like a 20-10-10, and implement those in those neighborhoods, and have the FAR. I took an average FAR, the houses on those lots, so that if anybody wants to build in those neighborhoods now, on any vacant lots that they have, I mean, there aren't gonna be many left, but I took an average FAR of what's in the neighborhoods now, and what we should allow on the smaller lots. That was just kind of a shock by getting out there and doing a survey. And then average alignment, if the houses are really close to the street, depending on where we are, village districts. And then on the smaller lots, like in Shangri-La and Parkhurst and those neighborhoods like that, it gives them a 20-foot front yard setback, 10-foot side and rear setback. And I think that was pretty consistent with a lot of the smaller lots back then.
Yep.
So I've tried to capture all that in this chart, but I mean, there's room for improvement, so I'm always.
Would that eliminate or take the place of, I think there's a section in there, and I remember going through it in Briarwood Beach, where you were allowed to make an expansion up to 25%.
Is it in this book?
It still may be in there.
I haven't incorporated that, but I mean, we definitely could. We definitely could. Like I said, this is just a rough draft. This is.
Yeah, that's, I know that's in there in some places, I can't remember the specific location, but there was a limitation on if you were gonna put an addition on your house, was it 25% under, or 25% of the existing footprint was the maximum you could do it.
Yeah, I have not incorporated that. I haven't seen that in our current bylaw now.
Yeah, this shows you the complexity of the different ways of approaching pre-existing non-conforming. It can be done through the dimensional standards of the regulations as well as Article 13. And it's worth the continuing the process, I think, in terms of looking at non-conforming structures, lots and uses, and taking something, at least some portion of this to town meeting in the spring, and I'm hoping you agree.
I do.
Well, if you put, like on the lots you mentioned, if you just said any pre-existing non-conforming lot would conform to X, 20 in the front, 20 in the rear, 10 on each side. Would that simplify it? Or whatever the numbers are, whatever you want to put in.
Unfortunately, I think it oversimplifies it. It doesn't necessarily work for every case, and that's where it gets tricky. Every application that comes in is a little different. Every situation's a little bit different, so,
You have to have a combination.
right.
Yeah, there should be some sort of correlation between the sideline and the elevation too. You don't want a four-story building next to 10 feet from which we've seen that too. We've seen mega mansions go up next to cottages, and it's just so out of proportion with the rest of the neighborhood. It's detrimental to everybody, you know.
Right, I actually do agree with that, and that's where FAR really comes into play and really helps out in those little lots, the smaller lots. It keeps people from being able to build 8,000 square foot houses on 5,000 square foot lots.
They don't do that in town.
Or put
Do you
10
compute the
dwelling
volume?
units on an acre.
Explain FAR again, is that just the footprint, or is that?
Ratio, it's a percentage of the lot size, that they're allowed to build a house.
So my question is that the footprint, or is that the square foot living space?
A square foot living space.
So it's a square foot living space, so they couldn't go up high.
Right.
Okay. If you had 10,000 square feet, we said it was 25%, they could build 2,500 square foot home.
Right.
So they could build a raised ranch with 1,200 square feet on each level.
Correct. We have FAR now in our bylaw. It's only in one district. It isn't, I mean, it doesn't come into play all that often, but I mean, we have it. It exists in our bylaw now. My proposal is just to carry it out to the smaller lots so that we can prevent that.
That would include accessory buildings, would that be separate, like a shed or a garage, freestanding?
Depends on how it's defined.
Right. It could. I mean, we have a situation in town right now where there's a accessory structure going up that's bigger than the house. And we don't have a regulation to prevent it, so it's probably not a bad idea.
Used to try that with the in-law apartments. Remember those, Charlie?
Yeah.
I got a
3,000
24 by
square
40
foot.
raised ranch that comes in with a 40 by 40 in-law apartment. Yeah, I used to love those. Well, I think what that'll do though is give you a little more control of some of those things without them necessarily just being bounced right over to zoning.
Right.
I was on zoning for a long time, and that's what it used to be, just some of the, and I remember a couple of the inspectors over the years, I said, you can't just take care of this, so. I think we oughta.
I mean, we're not taking away everything from the Board of Appeals.
No, I'm not asking to, but there's a lot of them, I think there's a lot of them, I used to see a lot of them would come in and they'd have a little entry on the front or a side entry, whatever, and it was only 6 or 8 feet out from the side of the house or the front of the house, and they wanted to make the whole face or side come out to that. Well, they weren't getting any closer to the sidelines, you know what I mean? They weren't making it, anything worse on the lot. Some of the battles were just hours.
Oh, yeah.
To let the guy put a 6-foot addition on the side of his house, which is no further out than the entry he's had for 30 years. And, it's just crazy. So a lot of that stuff you should be able to, in my opinion, you should be able to settle a lot of that.
Yeah, and if I could, I just want to be clear. I mean, if you read through what I've proposed, and if you read through what's existing in our bylaw now, a lot of what's in here is already allowed in our bylaw. There's not a lot in the rewrite that's necessarily new, but we've tried to provide more clarity, I think. But under 1335A, it already allows for additions that are conforming, but it doesn't specify and it doesn't clarify the issue about the non-conforming lot size. So again, a lot of what's in this is already existing in our bylaw, just clearer, and it gives the small exceptions where we feel like they're allowed and where they should be. That's all.
Reasonable?
And you want to include a better definition of lot, is that what I see?
I don't think we have a definition of lot in the bylaw. I could be wrong, but when I added that, I don't think we have one.
You do.
Is it only one sentence? One sentence or two
Yeah,
sentences?
an area or parcel of land or any part thereof not including water area in common ownership designated on a plan,
Okay.
duly filed by its owner or owners as a separate lot and recorded in the Bloomfield County Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
So if it's not on a plan, it's not a lot?
Right, right. There are a couple in here that I just rewrote, but there's others that are new that we don't have. And if you go through this as well, I mean, you'll see other areas on the rewrite that are in the bylaw now. Restoration of damaged or destroyed structures, that exists. Unsafe structures exists, that's all in there. It's just rewritten just to be clearer. And that's really all it is.
That's good, David.
Thank you.
I would only make mention of that definition of a lot though, because you can create a lot by description if you can refer to a plan that's already on record. But that lot in and of itself, except by definition, would not occur on a plan anywhere. But it's still allowed to be recorded in the registry. In other words, if I had a 10-acre parcel and it was shown on a plan that's duly recorded, and I wanted to carve out a piece of that and give it to somebody else, under the rules of the registry, I could do that, provided I could reference that plan, which I certainly could do. By meets and bounds, I could carve out a piece of that. But according to this definition, it wouldn't comply as a buildable lot. It seems like it's too much of a
Existing
restriction.
definition.
Huh?
The existing definition.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem like it would be fair.
Okay, so got the go-ahead for Article 13? Revisions?
Yeah, what's the process? David, will you do the final edits or you?
We're working together on that.
And if there's any suggestions by the board, we're happy.
No, I think it's great.
But, so I have just a question here. Non-conforming use, a non-conforming use of a building or land which has been abandoned shall not therefore be returned to such non-conforming use.
Right.
What does abandonment mean? You haven't paid taxes? I'm talking more for land now than a building.
So under Mass General Law, abandonment is discontinuation of a use for a period of 2 years or more. Okay? It's a really tough provision to prove. Under actually just recent case law, they say that you have to show intent to abandon, which, so I mean, it's out there, it's a hard provision to enforce, but if you discontinue a use, if you discontinue a non-conforming use for over 2 years, it's considered to be abandoned and cannot be reestablished.
So explain that with land to me. You got an acre of land, you cut the grass for 20 years, you stop cutting the grass for 2 years, you abandon the land?
No, it's the use under zoning. So if you own an acre of land and you sell apples on that acre of land, it's a retail, well, actually, I shouldn't use apples because that's agriculture, you'd be exempt. But if you sold cars on that acre of land, and that use, auto sales use, was allowed at the time it was established, now you stopped that auto sales use, and 2 years have gone by, but now the use is no longer allowed, and the use hasn't been allowed for over 2 years. It's now a non-conforming use. So if the auto sales use has been discontinued for a period of 2 years or more, that use itself shall be considered abandoned and cannot continue any further. require a use variance at that point to continue.
Put back the cart,
No. Doesn't that, 2 years hold for fire also?
It can. It
'Cause I see
can.
you
We would have to put that in, we would have to include that in the bylaw. I don't know.
Well, you've got it listed as 18 months, so,
Yeah, we can do 18 to 24 months.
oh, so,
They have to apply for the permit within 18 months. They have to complete construction within 30, I believe that's what I put in there, right?
I just say that because I know of instances where 18 months in, they're not done with the insurance company yet, so.
Well, yeah, so what we have right now, just so you're aware, I'll try to be brief, I know you guys want to get out of here. What we have right now is basically an open-ended process where if you have a fire on your house, it's infinite. Our bylaw does not specify any time frame whatsoever.
How about statute? Isn't there anything in the state statute?
There's not.
Oh,
No, so if you have a fire in your house, or if there was a fire, and there's a couple properties in town, I'm not gonna mention them now, but there's a couple in town, where if you had a fire 8, 10, 12 years ago, and you wanna go back and rebuild it today, it can be rebuilt. If it's a 2,000 square foot lot, I mean, you can rebuild it right up to the max. I mean, there's really nothing in our bylaw that gives a specific time frame.
I guess my own, I have a very short time here, but my only concern is, just clarity of definitions. You know, in the couple months I've been here, there was a definition of, was it lot frontage? It was an odd-shaped lot. It was a couple months back.
That's actually been addressed in this bylaw. Lot frontage on a corner lot says that you can only count to the, whatever it is, the midpoint of the axis. It's odd, so if you have a corner lot, it only allows you to use half of that lot. We changed that to where if you have a corner lot, you can count all of your road frontage.
Now, it was the guy, he wanted to build, it was a large parcel of land, he wanted to build in one little corner. And he needed to count up to 40,000 square feet, and he, remember he was counting on the far side over on the, guys don't remember?
Yeah, oh, that.
It was, there's like a wetlands area that interrupted, and then there was a little pocket of 8,000, 10,000 square feet. that-
Non-contiguous.
It was continuous, is the word, thank you very much.
Continuous upland.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
So-
wasn't.
so the, you know, any improvement that I see is, in the definition. Abandonment is something that's, and I'm speaking more from layman's terms here, what does abandonment mean?
Sure.
You gave me a commercial application, is there a example on residential?
It's any use, so if you had a single or two-family residential use,
No structure, piece of land.
so it doesn't, use doesn't care if it's a structure or land, it's the use of that piece of property, whether there's a building there or not. It's the use of the property. So if, I'm gonna use a 1 or 2 family house just because it's the use. I gave you one commercial one, if you want a residential one. If it's a single or 2 family residential use in a commercial district where a single or 2 family residential use is not allowed, okay?
No, my issue with this paragraph is, these are all great examples. You're using the word abandonment of land. There's no structure on the land.
Okay.
So, in my mind, the only way that you abandon that is you stop paying taxes on it. Otherwise, what would illustrate abandonment of a piece of land? You know, if I owned an acre, I own an acre of land in town here, I have no intention of I just wanna own an acre of land to go sit on a lawn chair twice a year.
If you own a vacant parcel of land, it's just a vacant parcel of land. If you don't pay your taxes on it, it's gonna go to tax title. It's not abandonment of the use. So I think we're talking about two different things. Zoning would be an entirely separate issue. If you don't pay your taxes, that's one thing.
Right.
But if you abandon the use of your property, that's where all that statement says is that you lose the rights to that use. discontinue that use for 2 years, you lost your right to sell cars on that lot without a variance.
This has to
That's
do
all that
only
is.
with non-conformity.
It's the use, not the structure of the land.
So you're gonna the town's then gonna demonstrate me because that piece of land that was used for auto sales didn't generate any revenue, your interpretation is it's abandoned? If I just park a car in the garage and say I'm still an auto lot, I don't wanna get to the whole debate about it, but this is what I see in the short time with the board, is this debate of definition of what is considered abandonment. There has to be a glossary of definition. Abandonment is, and does that definition exist right now, abandonment?
It does.
It does.
It does, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's in here, but I believe abandonment, actually it is in here. A non-conforming use of a building or land which has been abandoned shall not thereafter be returned to such non-conforming use. And it says, a non-conforming use shall be considered abandoned when said use has been discontinued for a period of 2 years, or when the characteristic equipment and furnishings of the non-conforming use have been removed from the premises and have not been replaced by similar equipment within 2 years. That basically, if you ask me, that says it. If you discontinue that use, if you stop operating that business, that use, and it's a non-conforming use, you lose your right to that use. Now you have to reapply for a new use. And if it's a non-conforming use, it requires a variance, so it's,
Okay.
you know.
If the use that you were using it for was an allowed use, it wouldn't matter whether you abandon that or not. The use would still be available to you at a later date. It's only a non-conforming use.
No, I understand that.
There's a lot to this, of course, but I think it's worthwhile taking this forward to town meeting at this point, if you agree. Then we'll set up a public hearing in January to discuss it.
At a town meeting, do the people who are there, are they going to understand what all this is?
I find that,
Yeah.
I find that presenting zoning to town meeting is like presenting the novel War and Peace in the original Russia.
And we have to do it, huh?
Well, they're gonna be so consumed by the marijuana thing, we can put whatever we want in front of them. Throw it all out there on this next town
We'll
meeting.
pass out brownies before town meetings.
So can we move on then?
Yeah. Any, I'm constantly asked about small lot exemption. Small lot exemption,
In what context?
that Wareham doesn't allow it, doesn't allow, and I don't remember, maybe you know the history on it, Charlie, I don't.
That's, it's gonna be a long night, Mr. Chairman. Let's not get into small lot exemptions, there's a lot that goes into that, and we haven't addressed that in this bylaw.
No, I just get asked, there's places like, there's an area along Cranberry Highway that some people of a mind would develop if a small lot exemption was created. There's another one, there's some residential pockets where pieces of land got stuck that don't conform.
Well, there's always spot zoning.
Got your dartboard ready?
Yeah, and speaking of spot zoning, the next one is on drive-throughs. This was brought up with a request by the Board of Appeals that we bring forward drive-throughs, restaurant drive-throughs, to allow them in the same way that non-food businesses are allowed in the general commercial district. So an option is to allow restaurants with drive-throughs in all commercial districts where restaurants are allowed. Option 2 would be to allow restaurant drive-throughs only in the general commercial district by special permit. And the third option is to continue the prohibition. The concern is that it would apply to the West Wareham, Cranberry Highway where you have all the commercial development going on.
No. It wouldn't, it would only be from 195 this way, because that's the only part that's general commercial. The other side of the road is industrial and strip commercial, once you cross the highway.
So we've reduced the scope of the geographic scope of the areas. I think it's still a question as to whether or not.
Well, my thoughts have been that you could allow it where entrance to and from could be accomplished either through a signalized intersection or within a larger site. Like if you wanted to put a drive-through in Wareham Crossing, where you actually have to go through a signalized intersection to get in there, you're not doing lane crossings on a state highway.
There's not direct access onto the highway.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can word it that way, but I think from a traffic standpoint, the main reason for the prohibition is the disasters we've had on Cranberry Highway in East Wareham, and not wanting to repeat that.
You wanna go to McDonald's instead of Wendy's, you just got right across.
And a lot of them do it with their eyes closed, I
In
swear.
11 more years, we'll have a median strip there, so that won't be bad.
Well, that just means they'll have a jump to get across.
So you've been saying that since I met you?
It's all done, Joe. Sorry. It's all signed.
I mean,
Drive-throughs, I remember the hearings for the plaza, Wareham Crossing. And when you first pull in off Cranberry Highway, right on the right, that was gonna be a bank. And there was something about, they wanted a drive-through, and they couldn't get a drive-through. And I was talking to Lou Mazziello, this is years ago, he was and he says, they're not gonna get their drive-through, they're not gonna put the bank in.
well, they're allowed on banks.
Well, I'm just saying, whatever it was, he couldn't get a drive-through.
It wasn't as of right.
So then, is it Wendy's coming now? Who's coming now? Someone.
They're talking down there.
Wendy's is,
So, how many Wendy's have you seen without a drive-through?
None.
No, they won't build.
No, you know what I mean? They're gonna walk away, so I think the point, the point is a good one, that as long as you're not cutting across the highways or whatever, if there's a signal, you gotta get into the place to get to it. What's the harm in having
Human nature is to do the opposite. A good example is the new Aldi's. There's a exit out on 28.
yeah, well,
You're not supposed to take a left-hand turn.
they all take
Sit
a
there
left.
for 10 minutes, see how many cars you see come out there and take a left on the 28. There's lines in the road.
All right,
They do it coming out of Walmart, same thing. The entrance on 28, they go in there, you're supposed to come out, you're supposed to be a right. No, they
No,
be a left and go right across. That's just human nature.
But that's an enforcement issue at that point.
So we want option 1, 2, or 3, or we still wanna discuss it?
Question, please. What is the West Wareham strategic plan?
Spot zoning.
it's a plan that was done by the neighborhood association, I believe. They laid out a concept for the development of the West Wareham.
3 years ago, West Wareham was all woods.
Was the zoning regulation prohibiting and not allowing drive-through windows in West Wareham
Right.
passed? Is it existing?
They didn't want to change, that's what the study was. The study was not to change the makeup and nature. When the property got sold from the electric company, the town passed on it. It then became, developed for a mall. They basically didn't want fast food restaurants, et cetera, in West Wareham. But unfortunately, the demographics and having 195, 25, and 495 intersection where it is, whether we like it or not, our business center has moved out to there.
Nice.
And you've got, right now, you have the Robinsons property, which is still open in front of Walmart, has 4 pads sitting waiting. I believe the Wareham Marketplace has 3 still open. I believe that Rosebrook, I think Ken is full now
Yes.
for that piece.
Well, there's one more lot.
I'm not sure if there is or not, but we have that, you know, we still have, you know, the Tohonet Industrial Park somewhere down. We've taken, I believe Ken has taken and submitted to the state, on the road stuff as far as, you know, for expedited development stuff on this whole section of town. We've also included, through SERPED, the area of the road itself is a strategic road for business economic development, which basically covers that area as well. That got put in as well. So it's a difficult thing because you're really not putting fast food restaurants into the residential area. You're putting it into a short area where the town, because of the mall, Walmart, et cetera, has become a commercial center. And most businesses, in order to survive, there's a lot of businesses, pharmacies, drugstores, I say, that type of thing, banks, et cetera, that have drive-through now. And they're, I think Panera Bread was gonna come into Wareham, I think the Robinsons property. They had a new model that was gonna have a drive-through in addition to their standalone restaurant. And they walked away because they couldn't get it. The bank, I don't know why the bank walked away from, I think it was Wareham Marketplace, because they could have gone for a variance. They just didn't want to even attempt it.
Well,
An option like Robertson's, I'll use that just as an example, is probably one of the better ones because you have that controlled intersection to get into Walmart.
that's what I was saying, when you're
Yeah.
not crisscrossing.
And the other part of it is that if the site is designed so that you don't have a choke point to people getting in and out.
Yep.
And if you got circulation sufficient so that you can get the stacking of people that want to go through the drive-in away from the entrance, and they're not so close to a signalized intersection that now they're going to fight the traffic that's backed up at that intersection from other places. So it all depends on those factors which, are site-specific. And should be part of, the special permit process and the process that this board or the ZBA goes through to determine whether or not it's a suitable place for it. But, personally, I see no problem with changing it to allow it, provided there is a reasonable place to put it.
It should be all part of the site plan review when the projects are built.
Oh, sure.
I mean, that should be laid out that way.
And it's not just a traffic report, because so much of the traffic reports talk about traffic on the roads 5 and 10 years down that have absolutely no connection to what is taking place right at the site itself.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time.
Especially if you're
I still go back to all
selling
those
coffee.
traffic studies at Walmart and the Aldis and all that, and not an extra car's coming down the road.
Isn't Walmart due for a traffic, isn't it 5 years now? Walmart had it, when that project had to come back with a traffic study.
It was in their special permit.
In their permit.
Yeah.
I think it's 5 years. Have to come back and do another one to see where they're at with the area.
Right, and one of the suggestions made by one of the planning board members was to have a transportation summit, talk about, get in with Jay Donegan, Walmart, and the owner of Wareham Crossing, and talk about what's going on in the intersection.
Yeah.
Maybe you throw Rosebrook in there, ADM. Talk about what's happening in terms of traffic and the turning lanes.
It's all, change, it keeps getting busier and busier. I mean, the one place which is not it's on Main Street, near where George's business is, Dunkin' Donuts, I always laugh because the traffic was right onto the street. And it's
The
always.
big impact there is the bottom of the hill.
Yeah,
When Dunkin' Donuts is closed, nobody goes left.
Yep.
Nobody used to take a left on the Main Street down Chapel Hill.
So I think what we do is we put this on with something that's more expansive and has a better definition of drive-throughs or the criteria in which a drive-through could be allowed as a special permit, and then use that as an article to give a chance for town meeting to have a vote.
you're gonna have to reach out to the people who did the original study for West Wareham.
Howard Stein Hudson, I believe it was, yeah,
And,
which is a
explain what it is.
transportation planning firm, yeah.
I'm talking about the actual.
That's when it was the New Frontier, though. That horse has left the
Last
barn.
frontier.
See, you can't, you're gonna go put this on the town meeting, and what's gonna happen is you're gonna do the marijuana thing first. Then the next thing is gonna say, yeah, we're gonna be hungry after we smoke all that pot. We're gonna need the drive-throughs.
It'll be
That
mellow.
one's gonna fly right through.
Free samples.
The other impact with drive-throughs is the effect on the existing businesses, but
Can I tell you this, I just wanna share something with you, because this is a new phenomenon on Toby Road, since Aldi's opened up. When you take a left onto Toby Road, the folks that are pulling out of Walmart are actually crossing 3 lanes to make a left-hand turn to that intersection. So what's happened up until a week ago is there was never anyone turning left. That turning lane was pretty much obsolete. Nobody had anywhere to go turning left. Now people are turning left into Aldi's, and they're trying to come out of Walmart at the same time. That opening by AutoZone should not, you have, those two opposing openings are very dangerous right now. I guarantee we're going to have accidents there, because you're crossing 3 lanes and then you're merging into one, and they're turning left on another, and then coming down the Cranberry Highway, it's a yield merge into Toby Road onto Walmart. So you're coming from Cumberland Farms, West Wareham, Cumberland Farms, and going left, that's a merge, which is just a yield sign.
I've noticed that myself, just going in there to make the inspections into the Aldi site. When you're going to make that left-hand turn, you've got people coming up that are making the turn into Walmart, they're coming right straight for you.
Yeah, they don't see it.
Yeah.
There needs to be the stagger between the 2 turning lanes, and there isn't.
Yeah.
Who should be doing that?
Wareham Marketplace, probably you should be asking them to make
That's
a
what, you
provision
know,
change.
I wasn't gonna protect one
You
over
can't-
the other. but-
Don't forget that there's still there's a request to increase the size of one of the buildings that's going into Aldi's
Yeah, that's
before the
nuts.
Board of Appeals.
well, that's it. I think the back of AutoZone is at their maximum setback, I think, from Toby.
Okay.
So you can't,
And the new building would be according to the new plan.
a minimum setback.
All right.
Well, I'll get the building official, can I ask a question on my interpretation of this MR 30 and the 15,000 feet? I just got a quick question, and maybe you can tell me if I'm on the right page or if I'm wacko. So the MR 30, you need 30,000 for the unit. If you wanna get a multi, you've gotta go to 45,000, which is, and then is it every unit after that 15,000 feet? Or is it every structure 15,000 feet?
We don't currently have an increase per unit in the bylaw now.
We don't.
We have it in only the village districts, I believe, it calls out specifically what the increase per additional dwelling unit is. But my belief is that it was removed, whether intentionally or non-intentional, it was removed from our bylaw.
Okay, so, and it's probably, it's gotta be 10, 12 plus years ago, one of those things came up on zoning, and so, Mr. Chairman, here's what bugs me, is, because maybe it's me, and that's why I'm gonna ask your opinion on it. MR 30 is 30,000 feet to put one unit.
Yep.
And you gotta go to 45,000 if you wanna have a duplex. How did we go to 5, like, as an example, one applicant comes in and says he wants 5 buildings on it, because he's got 70,000 feet. So in my mind, I was looking at it as, well, 45,000 feet gets him a duplex. So that would be one structure of 2 units. So now he's got 40,000 feet, and the way I was looking at it is, he could get another unit for every 15,000 feet. Am I not correct? Is that wrong to think that way?
I would not interpret the bylaw that way.
You would not, okay, so, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm wrong in my
It-
train of thought.
It was written that way in one of the zoning books.
I read that before. I was
Because
on
I-
zoning years ago, and you know, and something came up on that, and I'm pretty sure, Kenny's gone, God rest his soul, because he'd remember the case, because we went at it pretty good with this developer. What wound up happening is, he got a duplex, and for each unit, it was 15,000 feet, and he got, say like 6 units versus the 12 that he wanted. Because we interpreted it, reading it through that way, that you got 30,000 feet, you get 1. 45,000 feet, you get 2. And then for every 15,000 feet, to get to the end of what you had, is 1 unit. So, an applicant that came in maybe today, he has 5 buildings, he doesn't have that criteria. And I don't wanna judge the guy wrong if it's not in our book, but I know I read it that way in the past, and something had come up that way in the past. Now, the present book probably doesn't show it.
Well,
If you look at Article 6, I believe it's a 622, I mean, after this one, you have your own time.
Sure, yeah.
If you look at the village districts, you'll actually see a line in each village district that says each additional dwelling unit.
Yeah.
And it tells you what the increase is. I think it was, like I said, I think it was just removed.
Okay.
So when you went to unit 3, you didn't need any additional square feet?
How the bylaw's written currently, you do not.
So this, with 70,000 square feet, he could build those 5 buildings?
No, in the, the confusing thing here is that after the two-family, which is the additional, or the 45,000 feet, the next line says other residential use, 30,000 feet more. But what constitutes other residential use?
Well, it doesn't say 30,000 more, it just says other residential use is a 30,000 square foot requirement, and that's where the, so, it's,
So it's table 6 is what I wanna read again then, right?
Yeah,
Article
621.
Article 6, Section 621, Table 621 is residential uses. Section 622 is village districts, not uses, I apologize.
Okay, thank you for
Residential
that.
districts, 622 is village districts, and under village districts, you'll see that there's a line for each additional dwelling unit.
Got it.
See it?
I don't wanna take up his time though. Thanks, Charlie. Thank you. That's-
Yes, you're welcome.
Can we go on then with, because I had the Department of Natural Resources and the Board of Health and the zoning in my office asking about regulations related to kennels and dogs. And to make them consistent across the, across all the bylaws and regulations, because they're included in the general bylaws, the Board of Health regulations, and the Wareham zoning bylaw, and they're all a little bit different in terms of what they read as, so, one of the things is to make those consistent across all regulations. It's an emotional issue, apparently, with a lot of people and their dogs.
So it's only as a cluster, Charlie.
What's that?
Yeah, 30. Multifamily is only permitted as a residential cluster.
Yeah, there's a stipulation on that, though.
What is the opposition to making them all consistent?
Nothing.
So there's no opposition, is there any con? I mean, is there any negative aspect in the community?
No.
This is not your area, this is
Changes
with dog.
regulations, and then the town regulation would have to change as well.
Potentially.
To make them all uniform,
Correct.
it's gonna have to be a compromise amongst those two, and then apply that to the zoning bylaw book.
Right.
I don't see the differentiation between hobby and commercial, though. If you've got 10 dogs next to you barking all day, doesn't matter whether the guy's making a buck or not.
It's actually based on how the state requires them to be licensed.
Mhm.
Hey Dave, you want to use the microphone?
The state definitions don't include anything called hobby kennel, though. They have personal kennel.
So what is it you wanna do here?
Set the regulations so that they're all consistent across.
Yeah, the Board of Health regulation is down here.
The Board of Health would have to go on there, have to agree to change their regulations on their own.
Is that their existing one?
That's the existing one. The general bylaws would require potentially change as well. And then the zoning bylaw would follow suit. And that require town meeting action.
Does the Board of Health have any opposition to this?
No, they'd like to have it cleared up as well, too, because they're getting confusion and between their regulations and the Department of Natural Resources.
Okay. So then it would make sense to me.
Doesn't that make sense?
I guess so. I don't own any dogs, but makes good business sense to me.
Hey, okay, so I guess we'll proceed on that one.
Right.
Do you want to do horses and stables as well, too? I don't know exactly what the issues are here. But George, you had brought this up as,
Yeah, you only have one definition, I think, existing, and that's for riding stable. And people interpret that as, you know, being set up for trail riding, and it's not. The definition is the care and feeding of a horse is considered a riding stable.
Where do you keep your horses?
In this basement. The problem arose where a lot of stable permits were granted by the Board of Health without any consultation to zoning, so you ended up with stables in residential areas where they didn't belong. And then to aggravate the fact that people didn't properly care for their stables, so it created odors and created problems. And I don't think there's any language that dictates what kind of shelter you have to have for each animal, or how much room in your yard you can devote to that. I mean, you can go fence to fence, and we do have in the use chat where it's allowed and not allowed, and it doesn't seem to line up with,
agricultural land.
well, it doesn't line up with common sense, to be honest. You know, you could put it in a non-conforming lot in a 5,000 square foot area, but you couldn't put it out in West Wareham where you had 1 acre lots, you know? And again, this all goes back to if everybody was taking care of their animals and carting the manure away, probably nobody would have a problem, you know? But when you get less than humane conditions and sanitation, then you have complaints, and you look at the bylaw to help you, and it's not there.
As it is right now in our bylaw, if you have less than, all riding stables and kennels under 5 acres require a special permit. So in order to have an animal kennel or a stable, as of right, it requires 5 acres or more.
And if you notice, that's rarely the case.
I mean, is this a huge burden or special permit? How often is this coming in front of you?
It actually comes in front of us a pretty fair amount. Between animal kennels and riding stables, we send, I wouldn't say a lot, but I mean, we end up having to send a pretty fair amount of people out to the zoning board, just because they have personal dogs. So, I mean, it's a little bit of an issue.
So the dogs are more of an issue than the horses are?
Yes.
How many horses do you see in 2017, horse issues?
We don't see a lot of them up front because most people, I don't know why, but they just usually tend to go get the horse and do what they want, have to deal with it after the fact. They usually don't come in.
I know a couple of years ago, there was an incident where the woman was selling her house. And it's, you know, all around her, all the abutters had some sort of livestock going on. But because the purchaser wanted to have a horse and it wasn't allowed, she walked away from the sale. A horse there wouldn't have been a problem. It was backed up to woods and, you know. Not like you were trying to put one in Swift Beach or something. It was,
So what is the ask here now, is to align
To redefine.
the bylaws with the
Stables.
use, redefine stables?
Right.
And,
In accordance with the state law and regulations.
well, if we just, I mean, we could be more stringent than state law, but not less stringent.
For the most part.
Are we less stringent
well,
right now?
on state law, anything over 5 acres is governed by statute. I don't think we can infringe on that part, but under 5 acres, we can.
You can infringe.
I think it's a matter of just better defining, so they know what they're supposed to do. As I drive around, I see plenty of areas where they don't have 5 acres, but they open up to,
What about other livestock, though? What, I mean, I wanna raise llamas. You have bylaws for llamas?
you gotta have a psychiatric exam first.
Well, I mean, is it really just horses, though,
No,
or
it's
is
not
it
just
it's livestock?
It's all animals in the bylaw. It's all animals. It's pretty broadly defined right now, so if you wanna have livestock with less than 5 acres, you need a special permit.
But if you
Okay,
have
so
more
we
than
don't really
5
just need to redefine for horses here, we need to redefine for livestock.
I think
If you
that's the
have
question
more than,
at hand, though. I think that's what the question is.
if you have more than 5 acres in Wareham Village or Onset Village, you can have a piggery, and you can have a fur farm, and you can have all kinds of things. The code is so outdated.
Yeah.
But
this
if you
bullet item is the
consider
same.
if you consider chickens livestock, I mean, I think every other person in my neighborhood have chickens, you'd never know it. I didn't realize how many people had them.
Gotta get some roosters.
You don't need 5 acres for chickens. Of course, you get a rooster, that's a different story, but.
I don't know, to me, somebody would have to advise us of what is appropriate here, I don't
Mhm.
deal enough with livestock. You?
I don't want a horse.
Want a horse?
No, I don't want a horse.
Mind your,
Working on that for about 10 years.
yeah, of course, it's halftime, that's why you gotta get out
Well,
of here.
I'll be in my driveway about 4:10 in the morning. I'm hoping to call you.
All right, so we can have some additional information on that and make a decision later as to whether or not you want to take it to a public hearing. All right, you have to tell us what the score is.
It's 10:13, we're down right now.
All right, so let's keep going then. Design guidelines. Article 7 is the design standards and guidelines. There has been a lot of discussion in applications before the board about the application of the architectural standards. And so one option is to focus on just on architectural standards and generally revise the structure and the content of the section. And the other option is to make specific changes to the existing village, commercial, and industrial standards. And that could be something like addressing the sheet metal buildings. There would seem to be a concern amongst the planning board members in previous applications.
Well, I think we're being a little too general there, because I don't think it's the steel or wood frame buildings the objection, it's the finish that is being objected to. You know, like if you take a Morton building or a Space Metal building, if you address the facade differently and didn't have the raised seam steel and put a shingled or a more traditional facade, I don't think anybody would have a problem with them, as long as it was pleasing. Is that accurate?
Well, it goes beyond that. I know it's late, guys, but there are a few things we really need to do. One is that any applicant that comes before us should provide much more detailed drawings, which will include context. By the way, before us a few weeks ago, there was a project, and we were being asked to approve this building.
That's nice.
And the information was so badly presented that none of us here were able to ascertain what we were being asked to approve. Okay?
What is that?
That's a building. That's the elevation of a building. At,
Orthodontics?
no.
Oh.
The 360-foot long building,
Oh, Patterson's Brook?
Patterson Brook.
Yeah.
This is 360 feet flat facade. There were a couple of holes in it by 240, or 180 feet by 300. We were being asked to approve this. So if we're gonna make our role here meaningful, we have to insist that they present informative drawings with context. What's the neighborhood? Tonight's example, for example, as an example, tonight's proponent for the five units, we need to see how these things would relate to the house next door or across the street. So then the discussion of materials clearly is part of that. And George has a good point. There's nothing wrong with metal. Well, I mean, depends where and how, but a well-done metal building in an industrial zone is okay. Forgive me, I have a picture of one here. It's how badly the materials are used that we need to be careful about. There's a metal building. It's acceptable. It's not offensive. They took care to articulate it. It's a mixture of materials, and the metal, which is the yellow portion, it's not offensive. So I think context is what we have to ask for, and they have not, several of the applications that have come before this board, I would have said, come back, go back and study and come back. And the other, that's one thing, so we need to be given correct information in order to be able to identify what, but I couldn't, I had to do this because the way they presented it, we would have never put it together, okay? That's 360 feet, 23 feet tall, metal building. And with proper presentation, we'd know what we're doing. I've got a little sketch here, which I'm sorry if it's too small, but you can have a simple proportioned structure, but it doesn't say anything until you put it next to the scale, next to the neighbor. And now you've got, so we have to ask them, do something, articulate it so that the existing small scale structure is somehow made, or rather the new structure is made to feel or to look compatible in some of its articulation. This is not a design, it's conceptual. We have to ask for clearer, more concise, consistent information. Some other questions are that in terms of the design guides, if you look at the section in Onset Village, it's got a very detailed set of requirements for design guides. It could be improved, of course. For Wareham Village, it's one paragraph or one sentence. So I guess, are we in the process now of updating the bylaw? Is this what we're doing? Or are we making recommendations to another body, to update the zoning, the bylaw? Also, what I think I've realized, and I offer it for your consideration, that the planning board doesn't really have much say in most of what happens in Wareham, in the residential areas, in the villages. If I look at if I go down the list of the principal use table, the planning board is at the bottom and it acts on special permits. And I would ask that we consider somehow in the town to establish a design review committee. I'm not sure that David would want to put more onus on applicants, but I think there should be a committee before which every building goes for approval. Other towns have it, and that's how they control their fabric. And I'm looking at all of the effort that we are trying to put in, but it's very limited to a very small number of it's some industrial and it's for special permits, but the work that's being done in the villages, which are, you know, the main fabric, and in other residential areas, we have no say in it. So unless I'm missing something, should there not be a design review committee in the town, whether it's part of the planning board's role or subcommittee of the planning board, or Charlie, you've seen other towns with design review committees, right? I mean,
They're a board typically that recommends to another board, such as if you had a design review committee, they would make certain recommendations on the design, and then that gets forwarded to, say, the planning board, if it's a site plan review that you take care of. Then they adopt those recommendations into the plan.
It could be tailored, though, to make it easy.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an onerous kind of thing, but when David has to issue a building permit, he needs to see an approval from the historic district, or I call it historic district, but my design review. Sorry, David, more work for you. No, you just get a piece of paper, that says approved by the design review committee.
The only thing that would scare me with something like that would be, you mentioned historic protections. I've seen how out of control historic committees can be.
Sure.
And, you know, I wouldn't want to inflict unnecessary pain, you know, you can, you know.
No, you're right, Georgia. It is a problem in some, if it's overreaching, but for my last 5 months here now, I see that. And when I look at the mess that some parts of the town is in, because there's nobody to oversee it.
Well, you mentioned industrial. If you read the industrial park, there's supposed to be a design committee and it doesn't exist, so.
No, but it is, but I consider Main Street, I mean, the villages, Onset, that's where the fabric of the town, that's where you get life, where you want to get people to come into the town. And I don't see whether any ability to control what happens there. I could be wrong, I don't know.
Well, where would it enter into the situation? Right when they come through the door saying, I want to build something in Wareham? And
I think that's part of the discussion we have to have, is where it applies.
or do you have baseline criteria in place so they know what they're walking into?
No, we would have, and I discussed this with Ken, we should provide illustrative guidelines.
Mhm.
For example, there was an old study done for Onset Village, land use and design in Onset, and they go, it's very interesting, and they have a control or a recommendation for roof pitches not to exceed 8 and 12, not to be shallower than 8 and 12. That's wonderful, because walk along Main Street and you get these almost flat roofs, or roof pitches that don't have any character, any connection with the history of Wareham. And Wareham, I've been noticing, has some very beautiful buildings, some beautiful homes, and you notice that the characteristics of these are the roof pitches, the detail, the overhangs. So I would sit with a lot of study that would have to go into it, but we could develop a set of visual guidelines, not as made in concrete, cast in concrete, but please bring us something that reflects or is consistent with these with these illustrations. We would have to show them what, rather than help.
That's my concern. And I think most applicants, if they know what's expected of them, that's what they'll give you. If they get away with raised steel siding, they're gonna get.
No, so I agree. I think we would give them the guidelines.
There's another form of that. George, do you remember when they had what they called the cabinet?
Mm-hmm.
There was fire chief, board of health, building inspector, member of the planning board. I sat in on some of them. Any board that a particular applicant thought he was gonna run into along the way of getting his permits. It was an informal discussion. Everybody that had representation sat around the table, and the applicant made an informal presentation of what he wanted to do. And at that particular point, he got responses back from the various people he was going to have to see as to what issues were going to come up that he'd have to address. And that's sort of the way that Mashpee does it with their design review. The fire chief sits in, I know the Board of Health does, remember the planning board does. They had an architect on the board at one time, I don't know that they do now. They had a landscape architect on the board. So anybody who was gonna come into the town of Mashpee that wanted to do a building or facility, they were gonna have to go and get their thoughts first. And then, based on that, then they made their formal presentation to the planning board.
Yeah, where we ran into trouble with that here was the planning board was not being informed of those discussions, you know.
Yeah, well,
They were taken, we were,
Certainly it takes a little communication for
and
any.
we did run into problems with,
Yeah.
you know, they got in front of us thinking they had already made the deal. And
But with illustrations like this,
Mhm.
would help the applicant. I mean, in this case, in onset, the recommendation was that an 8 and 12 pitch is preferable to a flatter pitch. I think these are very useful, and my thought would be that we rely on an existing Wareham historical or other good examples of buildings, and use those as guidelines. I agree with you that to make it too difficult is nobody's interest.
Mhm.
I think at the moment, we don't have any control at all.
That's a huge volume. I mean, we're chugging through a couple of cases here every other week. You're asking for considerations on all building permits of new structures?
Not necessarily, yes, a separate design review committee, sure.
Well, I think you're talking on
In commercial.
projects that would come in for site plan, not for every,
No, I think anything
Every
that's gonna
permit?
be built. But that's not, I mean.
Or a
it's
conforming
my
lot?
question, how does the town do this? Pardon? Yeah, as of right, if you can build as of right, but you should indicate to the town that what you were going to build is intended to fit in with the town. So there's a suggestion. I mean, I've been looking to see, you know, I see other things going on, but they don't have to come before the planning board, because there is of right. So if it's of right, I think I may have mentioned this to you once before. You know, I'm from Greece, as you know, and Greece has some of the most beautiful coastline in the world, but there is no regulation, and it has been absolutely ruined. I mean, it's because everybody does what they want. And parenthetically, for the Greeks, the law's for the other guy. So, but anyway, I just believe in thoughtful controls if we want to bring the town, frankly, the town is not in very good visual condition. And it's not going to get any better. I mean, this board works very hard, but very limited opportunities. And again, it's a question to you, not how could we, if you think it's worth it, how could the town develop such a, may not even be legal, I don't know what the procedures would be to make.
It is legal to have a design review, and it is legal to have standards. I think what we want to do at this point, and I would recommend continuing the discussion with Emmanuel and bringing others as well, to talk about design guidelines and how they could apply and in what way
Yeah.
we should consider the design review process.
It's a long-term project. For the immediate one, if we could, please, if, however we could for the, as soon as possible, is to beef up the requirements for submitting information to us, because you don't want to see any more, you know. I was insulted by that when they brought that. On behalf of the board.
Well, that's something we can do is, in terms of context in the submittals, make sure they're clear and concise.
Yeah, yeah.
The next to last one was the green communities. Actually, the last one is subdivision rules and regulations, which doesn't have to go to town meeting, but does go to a public hearing. And green communities is another one. We put in a solar bylaw in fall town meeting. It's been reviewed by the SERPED, the Regional Planning Agency, and it was suggested that we would have to tweak the bylaw to allow it to conform to the requirements for the Green Communities program. And we could do that, or we could change the, add a new alternative energy R&D facilities in the zoning bylaw. It would be allowed as of right. But I disagree that I don't think that would be, I wouldn't recommend.
They want to do the opposite of what we're trying to do.
Well, you know, for all the national news about, you know, getting out of the climate accord and you know, all that stuff, on the local and state level, it's still marching over the edge of lunacy as far as green. You know, they're still got investing a lot of money into climate change and things that they have no control over, in my mind.
The thing is that if we conform to the Green Communities Act, we get a potential for $250,000 a year for facilities improvements.
But does this mean that they would not come before us for an approval?
That's correct.
Improvement of what facilities?
For solar, large-scale ground-mounted solar arrays.
We get a $250,000 grant for facilities improvement. What facilities?
The town hall, the schools, this building.
But in exchange for that, you get to see solar farms anywhere?
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tax the marijuana.
Don't have it at all.
I think it's too premature to surrender our control over these solar panels. I mean, I just,
It's like this complete streets program. You know, they think painting a white line down Cranberry Highway is gonna make it safe for a bicycle.
yeah,
You know, it's craziness.
Yeah.
But
I can't help to, you know, just prior to the meeting, this gentleman knew you. I had mentioned your name because I was coming to the meeting. He owns the carpeting place down in Buzzards Bay. What's his name? Charlie, yeah, Emmanuel. He says, oh, look at his architecture. It's beautiful.
Doesn't have award flooring?
Yeah, yeah. So, but I would, you know, coming back to those solar panels that came in the last time and the fence line around them, I think it's gonna, that size facility is gonna have some impact on the ecosystem there with the migration of the deers and the wildlife. And, you know, okay, go ahead and put the gates in there. We don't know how this is gonna impact us right now. You know, you're gonna fence in all that area and then we're gonna have deers running out in the middle of 495?
well, you know, it's age-old problem. Tell me we're cutting down 40 acres of trees to put solar panels as being green, you know?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah, or
get the
Plymouth.
wash there.
The most upsetting thing is I gotta use paper bags in Plymouth again. That's driving me nuts. No more plastic bags in Plymouth. Let's cut down a bunch of trees because we haven't burnt trash for 25 years in this state.
Well, when the paper bags get stuck to the solar panels, they'll degrade, and the plastic ones won't.
So I take it there's
Are
less.
we the sole deciding factor on adopting the green initiative? Just
No,
this
we're not.
board? Who is
No,
the
there are other
alternate?
criteria that have to be followed.
Has to go in front of town meeting?
Yes.
It seems, I'm not in agreement. It's, give us $25 million, maybe I'll consider it. $250,000 is nothing to surrender that control in our community. I don't think that's a good decision on our part.
No, he's locking us in.
All right, so there's less interest in green communities. We can continue the discussion on that. Lastly was the subdivision rules and regulations, and we had a short discussion on this at the previous meeting. And it had started out with the, looking at it for the A&R procedures as to when the 21-day clock would start. And it went beyond that as Charlie and I started looking through the subdivision rules and regulations and noticing a number of other changes that were necessary in it. Do you want to schedule, assuming you do want to improve the subdivision rules and regulations, do you want to schedule a public hearing in January or as soon as possible? Or
Well, we need to have the
priority?
proposed changes first and look them over before we march it up to a public hearing, don't we?
I think I emailed them out to everybody.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I can do it again.
Do you know when you did?
It was a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, so it's recent?
On that. It was before the previous meeting. I don't remember exactly when it was, but
Well, we can,
a while ago.
we can send it out again.
So it was
Yeah.
over 2 weeks ago?
Oh, yeah.
I'll look, because I don't remember seeing that.
Well, I can email them over again.
Why do I think that from the last meeting, this one was important because of the notification we had to give?
The discussion she had on the notification?
No, the proposed changes, we're cutting it close to the timeline.
No, rules and regs is just a public hearing here. It's not a vote at town meeting. We don't have a deadline to get on the warrant.
Okay.
Zoning changes you do.
Are you talking about the A and R plan that somebody brought in? And said that you only had like until the next day and they were gonna grant you a waiver on the.
Yeah, well, that was really what's driving this whole need right here.
That's what sort of started it.
Yeah, but I thought, we discussed this in notification, January. I'm mistaken.
The rules and regulations are a separate process under the state law.
Okay.
So you want to do this as soon as possible? How do you want to prioritize the zoning articles and subdivision rules and regs? Because we
Well,
do
we have a deadline for the zoning articles of what?
February, beginning of February.
So I think we need to jump on those. At least prioritize which ones we should attack first, because Springtown meeting is pretty busy and
Well, medical marijuana or recreational marijuana is something that is going to be a moving target, but I think we have to do something because of the the deadlines for changes. Non-conforming lots, uses, and structures, I think, is an important one because of the impact it has on an enormous amount of property in town. Changing the drive-throughs it seems kind of simple to me. And kennels and dogs seem like a simple action as well. Design guidelines, I think, we have a phase one, which is the submittal requirements, and a phase two, which is to focus on the broader standards and guidelines. And green communities will require some more discussion before you want to proceed on that. Does that sound right?
That sounds accurate.
And what about
But
the
that,
lawsuit?
that means you included everything. Huh? You're gonna keep me at town meeting for a week, aren't you?
Geez, I hope not. You know, if we go to public hearing and you decide against taking it forward,
Well, I think one thing's important is try to get into public hearing with enough time to get back in with changes that might be made.
right. And then you can think of a strategy at the same time about what's before town meeting and the spring warrant, and what you think makes the most sense in moving forward.
What's it cost for the legal ad to advertise for either a zoning or subdivision change?
Depends how big the ad is. I think it was a couple hundred for the comprehensive.
If you get into a lengthy, if you have to print the whole bylaw, then it can get pricey.
No, what I was asking for was that, if it wasn't too expensive, and we could change that one or two paragraphs that deal with the submittal of the plans, so that's clear. Then you could wait on the other stuff, because there really aren't critical issues to the subdivision plans that we see right now. If we could just change that one paragraph that basically says you must file a plan here and not with the planning office, then you eliminate that
The 21-day issue.
21-day period where you're running up against, well, you gotta sign the plan tonight because your 21 days ends
Yep.
tomorrow. That doesn't happen anymore. Actually, that's the way the state law says, but the way that our regulations are written today, it says when it's filed with the planning office and stamped in there, then it's considered to be on file. And if they do it 3 weeks before your next hearing or your next meeting to consider the plan, you only got a day to consider it. That's not the way the 21-day period is supposed to work. Just there's 2 paragraphs that would be affected by that.
And a couple of phrases in those 2 paragraphs would
Yeah.
be enough to make
Yeah,
it work.
and that's all. Yeah. The rest of it could wait.
So you're suggesting that in lieu of a public hearing, just a public
No, we don't
notification?
go
You need a public hearing.
Both.
That's what I was wondering, how costly is it just to advertise for those 2 changes, and maybe advertise again for the other ones after you've gone through them and decide what you wanna do and you don't wanna do?
Okay,
You ready for an executive session?
sure, if you want to talk about the appeal.
It won't take long. Before everybody runs out the door. If you look on your agenda, we've got scheduled an executive session for discussion of a legal issue.
Thanks. Yeah, you cut it off now.
You want to cut it off after we vote to go in? Yeah. For the purpose of discussing litigation, I don't know which, I don't know what number that is, but we're specifically. Night, Dave. Specifically to discuss the litigation filed by 2384 Cranberry Highway LLC. and I will declare that issues discussed in executive session would have a negative impact on our position if discussed in open session. What I would need is a motion and a second and a roll call vote.
Motion to go in executive session?
For the purpose I just stated, okay. And can I get a second?
Second.
All right, Mark? We need a roll call vote, so I'll just,
Okay.
yeah. Is that an aye?
Aye?
Yes.
Yeah.
Aye.
Daniel?
Aye.
And aye for myself. Okay, now you can kill the